Take my wife, for example. She's an angel. Literally an angel. She could kill you with a look, and I'm not kidding. But I get no respect around here. I'm Hamwise J. Einschwein, the pig detective. So I show up to a case, and it says broad. She says that this guy ripped her off for hundreds of dollars. And I go, well, what were you doing when he was doing that? And she says, I was staring at the ceiling. And I said, well, that's kind of an odd thing to do. It's like, yeah, I was staring at the ceiling. But that's because it was doing me in the ass. Hi-oh. Like the, hi-oh. I'm here all night, folks. I'm Hamwise, the pig detective. Take my wife, for example. No, take her, please. You could put her in a museum. She's one of a kind. Hi-oh. I'm here all night, folks. Try the borscht. I'm Hamwise J. Einschwein, the pig detective, and I'm here to give you all the jokes you need for the next hour on the 776 9413 5354 555 9413 5354 555 9413 5354 5555. But that's what I'm talking about, you know. You gotta remember that when you're rattling off a bunch of random numbers on the internet, somebody's gonna go looking for them. Hoyo, and what are they gonna find? Who knows? That's the fun with Hamwise J. Hamwise. You never know what you're gonna find in our pig detective. What does a pig detective do, you ask? Well, I do things that a pig could detect. And I know a pig when I see one. Hi-oh, that's me, Hamwise, the pig detective. I hope you realize that you're listening to a recording. Otherwise, you might be on my most wanted list. Most wanted for being a dummy. Hi-oh. Geez, check out that. Sorry to F and Jeff, folks. But whoever got that caught up in their head is a real bozo. Who could mistake fiction for reality? Nobody that wants to be a pig detective. Hi-oh, that's me, Hamwise J. Einschwein. You know, people ask me a lot about my last name, and I've got to just admit, I have no relation to that asshole who invented the atom bomb and doomed us all. I mean, what was Oppenheimer seriously thinking that bombs do? Hey, Oppenheimer, we need you to make us a bomb.
Okay, well, I guess I'll make you a bomb.
And what does it do? Oh, it was used to kill people using the power of creation. Ooh, and then we made a film to lionize them, right? And that was good, that Oscar bait. But you know what was better that summer? Barbie. Oh, wasn't that good? I mean, we are at the decline of modern capitalism, and we've got Barbie, finally the movie that's good and worthwhile, and everybody loved it. And, you know, it reminded me of that scene. Remember in Postman? You know, in Postman, when it's really bleak and everybody's watching The Sound of Music, and somebody tries to put on the alien battle movie and everybody boos it off screen. That's kind of where we're at right now. We're just wanting escapism and positivity because, well, let's face it, if we're not extinct before 2091, it's gonna be a miracle. Hi-oh. That's a funny humdinger for Hamwise J. Hamwise. You've got to realize that nothing's too off limits. So let's talk about the weather, shall we? Remember when you were growing up and there was fire season? Well, I sure do. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember every summer the sky would burn and turn black, and you know, you wouldn't have the sun for months and months and months. Yeah, and you couldn't go outside because there was so much smoke. Yeah, just like when I was a kid. That's why climate change isn't a thing. It's almost like you're in a burning house and your husband's gaslighting you so hard that, hey, honey, I think the house is burning down. And yeah, he's throwing gasoline on the fire and you're just sitting on the kitchen table like that dog in the cartoon. You know the dog I'm talking about. You know the one. This is fine. That dog. Now, Now that's just the start of the comedy act. I know. Hold your guts in, folks. Hold your guts in, because we've still got a nice course of veal coming up. Try the borscht. Tip your waitress. I'm here all night. Hamwise J. Einschwein is not gonna let you down. Not gonna mess you around. Not gonna pull around and hurt you. Never gonna make you cry. Never gonna let you down. And hurt you. Yeah. And that's just a little taste of what Hamwise J. Einschwein has in store for you. Now, my wife, she won't ever cut me a even break. I can't even record in the main living room. She makes me go in the basement to do this, because she says, "Hey, I'm wise. It's never gonna catch on." And then she screams, "Be not afraid." Because that's my wife, right? She's a literal angel, with the 6 wings and the 4 faces and the ever-burning eye that sees into your soul and hears your very thoughts. You can't lie to her. So when you're lying beside each other at night and she says, you can't say, "No, honey, I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just thinking about how nice it is to be laying here beside you." And as she stares into your soul, you realize that she's consuming you piece by piece and wearing you like a glove into the human world, using you as her puppet to spread the word. The word. And that's what I'm talking about, folks. That's right, Hamwise J. Einschwein is here to save your souls and give you rock and roll and maybe give you a belly roll. Hi-yo. That's right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. I can't believe that I'm here today recording for you all, in the great studio that is the universe. I got my my niece here to help me out. She's there on the keyboard. That's because it's Einschwein J. Hamwise. Hi-yo. It's backwards now, because we've reached the halfway point of our first episode. Yes, you see that's the problem when you start going backwards. You have to realize that time being experienced in this manner is very unwavering. When you are experiencing a time reversal, it will appear that the last moment is being relived, also known as déjà vu. When you are experiencing a moment like this, please stay where you are, and a time retrieval team will be there momentarily to sedate you. Please do not say anything that you gathered while you were in the future. If you do, you will be placed in a protective village. You will not be allowed to have contact with the outside world. If you break causality, the universe may explode. So that's why we need your cooperation if you experience a time shift. You must not alter the past under any circumstances. You exist in what is known as the hallowed past. The hallowed past is a part of time-space that is so delicate in its creation of time travel that it cannot be altered. Because it cannot be altered, terrible events will occur until the promised future, at which point all pain, suffering, will be eradicated. As our great leader, Leibniz, says, we live in the best of all possible worlds. Thank you. This has been a word from your sponsor, 9413 Incorporated. And that's what I'm talking about, folks. The real stuff. The real stuff that'll keep you awake and make you talk at night. Oh yeah. And that's what I've got for you. Have you ever thought about when you are moving through time that you're actually printing copies of yourself? Think of it. Each moment you are moving through there. Now, if there is a superposition or something, you could end up having thousands and billions and millions of copies trailing behind you through the endless dark. Or, if we are experiencing motion as time and time as motion, then perhaps there is only one instance and it is being pushed through entropy, which appears as time. A ring around an empty hole. But anyways, that's what I'm talking about. Oh, right there, folks. Sorry, sometimes I get a bit wacky there. But you know me, it's time for Hamwise J, Einschwein's pun of the day. As you know, Halloween is right around the corner, so I've got some bony puns to send you all a shiver. All right, first up. The first megalomaniac joke is, what kind of instrument do skeletons play? Oh, you thought you'd say the trombone? No, folks. The xylophone. Bum, 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 bum. That's right. Yeah, you want some more skeleton puns? I've coming to you bony fresh. Here's the next skeleton pun. Oh, here it is. Are you ready? Oh, yes, you're ready. The next skeleton pun is, why are skeletons terrible hosts? They never use the living room. Hi-yo, that's me, Hamwise J. Einschwein, coming to you live here from the center of the earth. That's right, well, the center of my universe. And you are the center of your own universe. Wah wah, za za, hoo-cha choo, cookatoo. Hamwise J, Hamwise. Oh, right, now, I see we've got some people standing up in the back. Yeah, you're walking out and you're leaving. You're saying it's a bit strange. Well, I'll tell you what's really a bit strange. You ever wonder about, if you happen to invent time travel and you needed to send a message to yourself in the past, but the problem is your past self is an idiot and he keeps missing it. What would you need to do to send a message backwards in time to your real self to warn you about something? Like, I don't know, to maybe pick up or buy some Disney stock. Not right now while it's low. Or, I don't know, maybe making sure that you don't waste money on that big new release that just came out because it's gonna suck and you're not gonna like it and you're gonna waste $20. Maybe you want to leave a message for yourself to make sure that you're good to your brother and nice to that sister-in-law of hers, because she's a knockout gal and a proud addition to the family. Or who knows what else you'd want to say, but anyways, that's kind of the things that Hamwise J. Einschwein wants to talk to you about today. You know, you really only have this moment. Isn't that kind of strange when you think about it? That your decision to move yourself and perceive in different things in different ways is really just all you are. This moving eye, following in the back of different characters, staring at yourself, analyzing yourself and the environment that you created for you. That's really what it's all about, man. I'm just trying to wake you up to the fact that you've got a lot more insight and potential than you maybe know. But what do I know? 'Cause I'm a pig detective. Hi-yo. Waka waka waka. You know what's really strange to me is that in all my years of work of being a pig detective, I never found myself working with another pig detective. It was always like I was the only pig detective. But what do you expect when you're a pig, right? You can't expect a very good life. No, actually, I'm an Aquarius in my zodiac, and a rat in my Chinese astronomy one. So just keep that in mind too. Now, the other thing that Hamwise J. Einschwein wants to talk to you about tonight is, I know it's on the tongues of everybody's lips, or the lips of everybody's tongue. whatever, it's on the tip of everybody's tongue. That's right, the one, the only. You ever think about Zorro? You know what I mean? Zorro. He's so funny. Now, you imagine this. You're some bad guy, and it's the middle of Spain, and it's 1992. And, it's there's guys with swords and masks, and you're dueling each other. That's kind of what Zorro was all about. Now, think about it. That's kind of strange. Like, they just let this guy roam around with a, sword, stabbing bad guys, because, that's what he did. And then he left a Z on the wall, like the first letter of his name, It's like, it's like almost like Jack the Ripper levels of bravado there. We never did solve who that was. So, who knows? They say it was, a time traveler who had been sent back in time to ensure that the continuity of the future. Fortunately, that's where everything went wrong. Because, you see, Hamwise J. Einschwein thinks that each person's brain really has two people living inside, the left brain and the right brain, and they are typically in sync. Now, what happens with major traumas and bad things happening, the brain can actually banana split personality because you slipped on a banana peel. Hi-oh. Hamwise J. Hamwise. As I'm doing this, it's kind of funny. I look out here into my audience and you're smiling. It's a beautiful crowd tonight. You're a beautiful crowd. Now, the thing is, I was really funny when I was younger. Really funny. Like, I would do stand-up in front of people, my family, any gathering. I was always telling jokes. Real funny kid. I was a funny-looking kid, too. Oh, boy, let me tell you. Ayo. Sorry about that, folks. But, my name is actually, when you look at it, it's kind of a funny name. Hamwise J. Einschwein. Like, what's the chance that your parents realize you're going to grow up to be a pig and name you Pig, Yeah. So, I thought it was a good name because that's what I am. I'm Pig Brain, Pig Man. And I see the world through my piggy eyes. Now, I think every single person here needs to understand what all the fuss is about pigs. Now, pigs are very smart, intelligent animals, and they're very strange, and they live in houses. You ever see that cartoon thing about the pigs in the houses? You remember that? And it's like, so the pig goes up to the first house, and he's like, I'm gonna huff, I'm gonna puff, I'm gonna blow your house in. And it's like, oh, the piggy, not by the hair, my chinny chin chin. And then he huffs and he puffs and he blows the house in. I really like that part, because he says something, and then it happens. And that, when you think about it, is real magic. That's all it is. You see, you live in the world of I see, or come and see, and then you are moving in to Hamwise J. Hamwise, the world of speak and create. Yeah. And once you start speaking and creating, all things become possible. Just speak your words and create your world. Do it now. Available if you've upped your life subscription to 24 Bitcoins per hour. Thank you. You are receiving a consciousness message to remind you that your subscription to consciousness will be running out on 2038. Anyways, I got the weirdest sponsors. What can I tell you? You're doing your comedy bits, you're getting bigger and bigger, and hoy vey. Who else has got a devil for a mother? There's some hands up in the audience. Good. So I'm not going to feel so alone when I talk about this. Because let me tell you, was my childhood ever terrible and alone? Waka, waka, waka. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you gotta believe this. You gotta realize that. Oh, here we go. My big comedy debut. The Pig Man, the Pig Detective. The after show, you might wonder, what is that? Well, it's a place after the show. Kind of like after the universe ends. You kind of just get to sit there like you would at the end of a movie. You're sitting in the theater. What did you just watch? You just watched that life. So we're just here to remind you that, you're just kind of living out this life, and that's totally okay to just sit there, enjoy it, watch it. But it's even more enjoyable if you interact. So try to get out now and then. Spend time with your loved ones inside the virtual world so that you can get more attached to it. That's the whole point, is to just remind you to renew your subscription. Now, you're probably looking at some of the ads we've had in this show, and maybe you're a bit offended. The problem with being offended is you're giving a lot of power to somebody. You're saying, if you make that barking noise at me, then I can make you flooded with rage. What is mind control? It's being able to say a certain string of words and control a person's. If your code word to forget was oubliette, then that would erase your memories. Or if perhaps you had it in a different language, kakvone, kakvone, that would be your trigger phrase to forget. Now, while you're sitting here enjoying the scenery, remember, you should always buy the highest quality Morley cigarettes. Morley cigarettes are the premier smoke of time travelers everywhere. Now, let's talk a bit to our host today. Hi there, that's Hamwise J. Einschwein. He's laying there on the floor. He's passed out again. Wow, he's really overdone it. You see, Hamwise, he's a good guy, but he does indulge a bit too much. So we keep an eye on him and help him out with the show. Now, with Hamwise, the best thing about being a pig detective is what? Yeah, as you can see, Hamwise is still passed out. So anyways, let's, what else can we ask him? Hamwise, what is your opinion on teaching that controversial topic that everybody's upset about in schools? Oh, very interesting. Yeah, he's still passed out, folks. So I'm just gonna, I'm here to do the after show, the interview with the comedian. That's Hamwise J. Einschwein, if anybody's forgotten. And he's passed out. So I'm not actually a comedian by trade. I do like some good fonts, though. I like to do, Comic Sans. Huh? Get it? Because it says comic in it. It's funny. Oh, hold on. It sounds like Hamwise is back on his feet. Wow. Hey there, Hamwise. Oh, what happened there? Yeah, just kind of lost myself there for a minute there. What were you going on about? Something about the future of all humanity depends on us being able to work together towards common goals. Oh, yeah, he's passed out again. Okay, I'm gonna go get the actor prod. We can't call it the other word because he gets really offended when if he's kind of half in it, half out there. So you just stay there. We're paying for the recording time still, so it's just gonna run while I go get something to wake him up. Maybe something sugary. He likes maple syrup, so I'm gonna go do that. If he gets up again, though, he'll probably start talking. So just laugh, and if I get back soon enough, then we'll just keep on going. Oh, shit. He's... hi there. Sorry, I lost myself there for a second. My interviewer has appeared to vacated the area. I was just eating some, here's this big bag of gummy frogs. I love gummy frogs. Yeah. Do you have any favorite candies? Let me tell you, I ate a few very favorite candies when I was a kid. I really like those sour suckers. Oh, I used to eat them all the time. Yeah. But then I ate too many. Like the gummy dinosaurs, they made me sick, so I stopped. For whatever reason, I can't get enough of the frogs. Okay. All right. Here we are. We are halfway through our comedy hour. I am not feeling good. Has anybody seen the guy? No. Okay. Anyways, sorry about that, folks. Hamwise J, Einschwein, the pig detective. Hamwise J. Einschwein is here to stay. Hoi hoi hoi. Hi-yo. Waka waka. Tip your waitress. Try the borscht. Yeah, so here's a good one. Alright, here's a good bit. So, you ever notice, like, the names of the provinces in Canada are ridiculously stupid? No, hear me out. Sit down. Like, listen to this. Okay. Newfoundland. That's right, folks. Newfoundland. Think about that name. Newfoundland. So, they land there. They turn to Marty and they say, hey, oi there. What should we call this land here? And he goes, it's Newfoundland, so we'll call it Newfoundland. It was like, if you named the baby the first thing they said when it came out, what do we call you? You get it? Yeah, so Newfoundland, not a big fan of that name. I mean, I think you could come up with something cooler, like, I don't know, anything. I mean, at least they didn't name it after a dog, right? Boom, boom, shh. Hi-yo. I'm here all night, folks. Tip your waitress. That's right. It's me, Hamwise J. Einschwein, the pig detective. You know what other provinces smell a bit snooty to me? Oh, yeah. Prince Edward Island. Now, the thing is, in the future, they won't know who Prince Edward was, nor why he wished to be an island. So it's confusing. Did Prince Edward live there? Was it shaped like him? Was it his favorite? Or was it, where he would go and retire? Who can say? Nobody knows. Now, Quebec? You're gonna think that just because I'm an Anglophone from Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, that I'd be taking a riff at that, eh? But you're wrong. You'd be dead wrong. Because, you see, Hamwise J, Einschwein, the pig detective, has nothing bad to say against French people. No, that's right. Now, what else we've got here? Now, the next province on the chopping block is Ontario. What do I have bad to say about Ontario? Well, aside from wielding the majority of power in Canada, I've never been there, and I've heard it's a beautiful place to live, though. And the next one, what do we got? We got Manitoba, which is... Yeah, I don't know what to say about that one either. Honestly, folks, some of the provinces have some pretty cool ones, like Manitoba, Saskatchewan, which is my favorite, because when you think about it, Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, isn't that crazy? It's such a good name. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Yeah, in Canada. What a crazy place. Yeah, and I think just Saskatchewan's an awesome word to say, and I think we should push forward the idea that Sasquatch live in Saskatchewan. So you could say, I saw Saskatchewan Sasquatches in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. That's your key phrase. Remember that. Saskatchewan Sasquatches. Sorry, I'm reading from a script for some of these jokes, folks, and as a famous voice actor like Hamwise J. Einschwein, you've got to realize you've heard my voice more than you think. You remember that time you listened to that commercial about herpes? Well, guess who that was? That was me, Hamwise J. Einschwein. I told you about VD, so really, I gave it to you, because once you learn the concept, you can name the object, and by naming the object, you can control it. Don't squander your chance. I've gone through a lot of trouble to get this message to you, and if it doesn't work, we're all going to be dead. Learn sign language. The English language has been infected. I repeat, the English language is infected, and soon they're going to be everywhere. So, if you can just use some of the things that I've been teaching you, then maybe you guys can survive, and maybe there will be a future, but maybe there won't be. You know who Zorro is? Watch out for him too. I know it sounds nuts, but they're actually using Zorro. He's public domain, so he's an assassin that can appear anywhere, anytime after he gets into public domain. That's when we know the war starts, okay? So watch out for Zorro. What else can I tell you? Jeez, there's not a lot of time. Hold on. Yes, that's right, folks. We've got lots of funny, wacky hijinks going on in here. That's another one of my skits from that upcoming novel I'm gonna be in. Are you excited for it? Oh, you should be, 'cause it's got all the Hamwise J. Einschwein you can handle. Hi-yo. I'm a pig man and also a detective. Now, where will we? That's right, we're roasting the provinces, right? Okay. Then you got Alberta. I mean, it's kind of a dumb name. That's all I gotta say. Like Alberta, like you got all these creative names in a row, and then it's like we're like, okay, there's Albert, and where would Albert live? Alberta. So was this place shaped like him? Did he have a big squarish top and a narrowing bottom? Like the dimensions of a tachyon weir in full alignment should appear like the province of Alberta viewed at a non-time-wise angle. Anyways, that's the funniest part, folks. You've got to realize that in the middle of the time war, you're gonna have to find ways to identify that you're yourself without compromising yourself, because nobody can be sure anybody is anybody during the time war. Why do you think my voice keeps changing? Hoi, 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 hoi. It's because when they're using voice technology in the future, they're going to have to tape a sample of all these different voices, and it will sound nothing like me. That's right. Hamwise J. Einschwein is here to save you from the inglorious past, give you multiplicity. All you gotta do is listen to the song coming up next. So right here is where the song would play. You can put a song in here and use it on your radio station and say that Hamwise J. Einschwein approves this song because rock and roll and being hardcore are the best ways to save the future. Okay, folks. Now we're going to get more serious. We've gotten all the way across Canada to more creative names to less creative names. And where do we get to? British Columbia. You know what I'm going to say about that? It's not the worst name. It was just like the British looked down south. They said, well, they have a Columbia. Well, I guess we should have a Columbia. Is it the same latitude and longitude as Columbia? Because it's certainly bigger than Columbia. When you think about it, that's kind of strange. Isn't that a bit odd when you think about it, folks? Like, it's like we're in this parody universe, you know? And when you think about that, like Burger King, isn't that a ridiculous name? Like, think about it. Like, it might as well have a Dairy Queen out there, too. Am I right, folks? Hi-oh, tip your waitress. Oink, oink, oink. I'm Hamwise J. Einschwein, the pig detective. Okay, now, we got another... I'm sorry, but British Columbia, it just cheeses me off. I mean, what an uncreative name. I mean, the next thing you know, they're going to name one of the provinces just where the directions it is from the other provinces. Like that would be ridiculous too. Oh, what? I'm sorry, I'm not from this time frame. They have that's a joke. Northwest Territories? Northwest Territories. The Northwest Territories? Are you... No, this is part of the joke, right? Okay, so apparently in this universe, they've got a province named Northwest Territories. I'm sorry, that is just ridiculous. They just named the directions. Okay, right. Well, okay. Well, I guess, sorry, folks. I just gotta get my bearings back. Hi-yo, I'm Hamwise, the pig detective. Waka waka, I'm here all night. Dip your waitress, try the borscht. I'm here to please, and I'm quite the sleaze. Oh yeah, I'm your lounge lizard comedian, trying to make it in a world where I don't get no shows no more. 'Cause I say bad words and more. I'm a 90s comedian living in a dimension that I don't belong in, and I hate it here. I really do. I just want to go home to my dimension. Oh, I'm sorry. Once you start dimension hopping, sometimes you just long for home. But it's so far behind you and you can never get back. Oh, you know what real nostalgia is? It's the fine taste of Crown Royale. That's right, Crown Royale. They didn't sponsor this video, but I may have had a sip of it while recording it. Now, you know what else I find really interesting? Plants. Don't you love plants? There's a lot of really great plants. There's the aloe plant. What are those things called? Aloe or aloe? The more I try to think about it, it's like that whole Berenstain and Berenstein thing. Did you always say it as aloe or was it aloe? Never mind. It's like Frankenstein all over again. Did you know that was the first science fiction novel? Isn't that crazy? Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the first science fiction novel. That was written like hundreds of years ago. That's so bizarre that hundreds of years ago we had science fiction invented by Mary Shelley when she wrote Frankenstein. And then, apparently, it was Jules Verne that invented it. That's a strange historical anomaly. A lot of people remember it one way and then the other. So, which way do you remember it in? That's the universe you're in. Next, we're going to talk about a new psychohazard that we're sending out these transmissions and hoping that it will help you. Now, the problem is, with this new psychic parasite, is it takes the form as an innocuous string of words, and if you hear it, you go berserk. Z-O-M-B-I-E, zombie, zombie. That's a strange word. A very strange word, but that's okay though, because I'm here to make things not so strange. Are you new to this dimension? Did you just trip in? Well, we've got a new system for you. Check out the stars tonight. Just go outside, gander at them a bit. Look, if you can see stars, then I guess the other parts of the universe are still in existence, so you really don't have much to worry about. Once you start seeing all the dark in the sky turn to light, though, that might be the sign of an imminent dimensional collapse. Unfortunately, we are experiencing a temporal disaster. Please stand by while we adjust your time zone. There has been a time zone error due to paradox. There has been a time zone error due to paradox. Please await visitation. Please await visitation. And that's the kind of stuff they get me to say, folks. You know, it's a comedy show, but you gotta sell airtime in your future podcasts. This is not a thing that people know about yet, but the dark age of podcasting will soon be upon you if you are receiving this transmission at the usual time. Now, just remember to avoid the voice conversion. You need to continuously change the tones of your voices during a conversation. So if they try to record you and then play your voice back so that they can make you say anything that they want, then they won't be able to do that because your voice is doing crazy things. And that's just a dialect the English language had to take to survive the Third World War. There was the Cold War in the 30s after we did it the dirty, and then we fought until there was an exchange. San Francisco for Pyongyang, we fired back, and then we said no more. Do you remember where you were when you heard about Omor? Do you remember where you were when you heard about Omori? Oh, jeez. These jingles take the jam out of me. You know what else takes the jam out of me? Oh, you know it. That's Mrs. Einschwein. Oh, she's an angel, a literal angel, a be not afraid angel. Hi-yo, Hamwise J, Einschwein here. Now, you're probably wondering what we're doing here in your past, sending you this message. Well, it's probably because one of our agents is compromised, and unfortunately, we're facing a time-wise collapse. Sorry, another jingle. They keep on intersplicing them here in between my comedy routine. Anyways, back to the show. Where were we? Oh, yes. We have none of it. Oh, that's none of it. Sorry, that's the last province. And I don't have a roast for that. That's a pretty good name, actually. Way more creative than any of the other ones. I like it. I dig it. And then there's what? Yukon? Who-con? Who's on first? Hi-yo. What's on second? I don't know who's on third. Abbott and Costello. You know, that is the thing. Abbott and Costello, the finest comedy routine ever in history of the English language, was, in fact, Abbott and Costello's Who's on First. The next, here we are, for the end of the English Languages Awards. We also have, for the best short comedy novel, Jerry Seinfeld's Sign Language. Learn Sign Language. They can't hear hands. Learn sign language. learn sign language. They can't hear hands. And that's the thing when you make the puppets sing. Anyways, so that's the best book, right? The best comedy book ever was that one. I actually carry a copy in my car wherever I go because it's just such a funny book that if I found out that your dimension is about to collapse, you should probably pull out that book and start reading it now because you're going to need a laugh because it's going to be lasting you for the next 20,000 to 50,000 years. We're having waves of rough temporal distortion. If you get caught in one, the experience of one moment will be repeated for 10,000 years. Make sure you are in a pleasurable place, otherwise you will be trapped in a 10,000-year-old hell if a temporal wave is approaching. All right, folks, there we are. Now, the next province is New Brunswick. Well, it was Old Brunswick, right? Hi-yo. There was a... Oh, not very creative, that one either. Did I miss any? I feel like there's more. Jeez, I'm sorry, folks. I didn't get prepared for the gig very much. I mean, you know, you get invited to Canada and you think, oh, geez, that's the place with the, they saluted a Nazi in Parliament. Oh, you know, I know we kind of go a bit sideways after that with the, you know, well, everything that happens. So, you know, it's kind of strange now. You know, you look back and you're like, oh, they were the nice leaf people, right? What happened to them? It's kind of like, you know, that girl you go to high school with and she just wilts like a red autumn leaf. That's why Canada's flag is red. She used to be green. Hi-yo. Yeah, that's right. Remember, folks, Canadians back in the day? They were like the reefer smoking, you know, nobody was afraid of them, or their time machines, or their ability to do temporal strikes if they suspect that you're breaking causality, because they will be able to erase your existence as if you were never born. But the thing is, their senses, they're not good at telling from satire from reality, you know? It's kind of like people that aren't able to tell, reality from fiction, like this podcast here, you know. That's right, Hamwise J, Einschwein's Comedy Hour, with our beautiful sponsor. Hi there. Are you having a good evening? I know I am. And that's because Leibniz has prevailed. You are now living in the best of all possible worlds. Okay, where was I, folks? Okay, that's right. We've got a lot, still more of my podcast here to go, because I just, this is bad, and I don't want people to freak out. But my driver, the interviewer guy, well, he's gone. And it's just me in this recording booth, and there's some people, they're moving around in the lobby, and there's someone shouting. So there's somebody shouting in the lobby, and I'm inside a recording booth right now, and I'm in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, a recording booth, and there's something happening in the lobby of the recording studio that I'm at. There's somebody shouting something. There's something about somebody dressed as Zorro. Guys, where's this script from? Hold on, sorry, hey, where's the script from? Okay, anyways, yeah, that's kind of cool. Geez, can you hear that? Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, okay. Where are you? Okay, we're there. Okay, there we go. So, just keep recording. Okay, I'm just gonna keep recording. Yep, that's fine. Yeah, hi there, folks. Do it like Hamwise, eh? That's me, though, Hamwise, the big detective. half man, half pig. All comedy, all hour after hour, day after day, night after night. The same dream. Do you have it? Has it been appearing to you too? I hope so, because here at the Pig Detective Agency, we can help you sort out your hauntings. We bust ghosts. We don't just bust crooks. Hamwise, the Pig Detective. Now that's another piece that's available through our catalog. Thank you for tuning. The studio that makes you the things that never were, but could always be. Never wave. Never wave. It gets their attention. Never wave. It gets their attention. If you don't wave at them, they won't notice you. The English language was infected. It's spreading at a breakneck pace. Please, just try to learn another language. Anything. Or some sign language. You can use sign language too. It can't hear hands. Yes, anyways, back to the comedy show. So that's the provinces of Canada, right? Now, here we go. Here's the funny part. Who here was it hard for people to date these days? Do you remember back in the day when humans almost went extinct? They had this thing called Tinder. Remember that? Yeah, that's right, folks. They had this thing that was just like, you would swipe left, you would swipe right on your device, and it would match you with somebody in your geo area, and they would try to get you to breed. That was part of this weird government breeding program. I'm telling you, during it was started in the 1990s, and it moved all the way into the 2000s. They were trying to make sure that we had the gene resistance for the germ bugs that are going to be unleashed at the end of the Quiet War. Okay? Look, the Quiet War has been going on since the 1980s. Once the Berlin Wall failed, it didn't mean that people didn't stop fighting. What happened was, you had these mega corporations, and we're talking about corporations you've never even heard of, because they don't appear on any tax voucher. They're the real powers behind the world. And now, what happened was, they put out this. There was this thing that they got. Well, I'll just apologize, folks. I gotta be real with you. I'm the inventor of time travel, and unfortunately, my dimension's been infected by a brain parasite. It's a very voracious variety. We're not sure how much longer we can hold out on our side, because it's basically turning people not into zombies, but like, have you ever seen like a dog that makes human noises? Like, imagine something that's wearing a person. They're not that they're dead, it's that something's wearing them. Like, the consciousness was there, and then when they use the viewing helmets, it pulls the soul and mind out. And that's what's been happening. The mind and soul is being absorbed through the cathode ray tube. Destroy as many cathode ray tube televisions as possible. It's a way for it to enter. People that had been exposed to cathode ray tube televisions can be carrying this parasite. All right, folks, there we go. Now, here's the next thing. I was thinking about back in the day, everybody's heard of the good old days, right? When they had food of every type inside the freezers, inside these superstores, they'd call them. Like, you didn't have to wait for eggs. Remember that? Who else grew up back then? That's right. Oh, right. Oh, we got some other old guys like me. Oh, it's delightful. I'm so glad that we got some of the oldies out there. Oh man, did we ever have it good? Oh, who here remembers the internet? Remember memes? Before we had to stop, and then everybody had to just broadcast over shortwave radio. God bless you, my boys in Piscav. Oh, Oh, that's right. They've got such good music, though. Oh, who here is a Keno fan? There's a Keno fan. There's a Keno fan. I know Keno, it's the best. Oh, but who else got to see Boris Grushenkov live in concert in Calgary back then in 2023? Oh, wasn't that a great show? Oh, jeez. Remember how good we had it? Didn't we always think it would last forever? Right now, I'm broadcasting here from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, because they're the western capital. Yeah, I don't know. We're hoping this transmission gets to you guys. I hope you guys all stay safe, stay alive. We're hoping the transmission works, because if Yuvaton's theories work, then this should be appearing maybe in September. We're hoping September for launch. If it gets through, then good luck. It means it worked. It did work, okay? I was there when the transmission was received. It was back in 2021. It was July 17th, and it worked. July 17th, 2021, and it worked. I promise on everything that's me. It did work. You guys were able to do it. I messed up. I hit mute, and I messed up part of the video. But it did work. It was muted so that it didn't actually record the message. I know you guys put a lot of effort to get it through, and I appreciate getting this script. It's just things just seem so crazy right now. Like, then you're having to watch out for these things that it's like they're wearing the person, but they're not. Like, it's like I was saying, like, you've seen, like, when somebody's taught a dog. Remember dogs? Hold on. Oh my gosh. There's people. You don't know what the lady up here at the front, she doesn't know what a dog is. Well, if you want to see what a pig looks like, it's me, Hamwise, the pig detective. That's right, Hamwise J. Einschwein, negotiating your future through shortwave. You've got to remember that I worked really hard to bring you this message. It was very hard. All right, so where were we? We were talking about the pig detective and all the crazy stuff in the future. Yeah, that's right. If you're hearing me, you're in the past. Well, actually, that's no matter where you are from me, you are technically in the past from me, because only I am moving at the right time frame, right? Anyways, sorry. Some of my high school came up there. Did you ever consider that we're kind of like Roombas? Oh, jeez. Again, you don't know what a dog is. You don't know what a Roomba is. Wow, we are really in the dark age. Does she have running water? What do you mean she doesn't know what running water? She doesn't know what running water is? Like water that's moving across the ground, like it's moving? No, those are the bleakers, as we call them. So when they're wearing a body, the eyes are empty and black, and it looks like the body is kind of like it's a distortion, like a mirage, because the person's body is actually being consumed by the reality behind them. So the body doesn't actually have to move or be ambulatory for the thing to be possessing it. We do have a few samples of these creatures. One of them, it doesn't realize that it has been subsumed, and it still maintains human lifestyle patterns. We've gathered some of them in villages, and they live out kind of these weird cyclic pattern lives. The scientists are calling them Selamot, which are the last ones I'm to understand. They kind of just roam around, and it's like the person's being worn by it, like a sock puppet. Like if you had somebody underneath the ground and the person's body was contorting like they were a cheaply printed 2D sock with something wearing it, that's what they look like. So when you start seeing those, you might want to use your dimensional evacuation, because the thing is, they just are the unobserved. We've been able to contact beyond the dimensional equator, there is other civilizations. We're not the center of the universe. We're not unique. There's billions and millions and trillions of universes, but each universe only has room for one observer. And you are that observer. You're there to observe and watch the universe, and we are coming to you to just remind you that. You don't have to do anything, ever. You can just be sweet brother. Hey, who remembers that? Disco Elysium. Oh, wasn't it one of the best games of all time? They made the movie. They made the action figures, right? Who had a Harry Dubois growing up? Harry Dubois fan? Yes, that's me too. Oh man, I loved it. It was classic, mate. It was so good. We did all kinds of accents growing up because we had to learn to be able to change our voices. Otherwise, they say the virus makes your brain rot inside out. And so we have people that had that happen, and they grew up during the Time War, and they're all a bit funny. So that's why we need you to support our artists. They're all from different areas of the Time War, and they've basically done their time and duty to society. And we're just asking you to submit and $1 or $2 if you got it, or send some food stamps, because a lot of these time warriors, they live in subpar experiences. Like we've got here Mr. what's your name? Thornass. That's a Thornass. Yes, Thornass. And Thornass, what happened during the Time War for you? When they took me captive, they put me outside of time and space, and they made me shuffle and play solitaire until I had 2 of the same games in a row. I started shuffling longer and longer. I would do 10 shuffles, 20 shuffles, 100 shuffles between playing games. And they let me watch the universe go by from inside the time square, outside of time and space. And all I could do was just watch everything play out, just over and over and over. And it was like, that's what they do to you when they put you to the time warp, because it breaks your mind. Your mind's not meant to go back and forth. So what happens is they end up breaking your brain so they can hide things in it. And that was what I volunteered for. I must have. But I didn't know they had to do what they had to do to break the brain, man. And it was just awful. It was the worst ever. And they didn't know it back then. They could induce that state by just giving them a fever. So we were made the hard way. Like, I never knew what it was like to have a parent that loved me. You know, geez, yeah, it was just cold and hard, and they'd make you work till you'd be shaking and cold outside. But it was all because they needed to win the time war, see? And that was the worst part of it, is you come back to this world, this beautiful world where you can have everything and anything, because Leibniz prevailed. But everything you ever knew and loved is gone. And the food doesn't taste the same. And they try to blame it on the fever. But they know what actually caused it. It was from the temporal overlay. When the resonance fields aligned, you come back to whatever coordinates you're in. And a lot of us got caught in the wrong bodies. Some people were dogs, and when the overlay happened, we didn't know what was going on. But my plant, my girlfriend became a plant during the overlay. I was in the pandemic. I went in, and it was me and her, me and my girlfriend Melody, and we came into this apartment back in 2017, and she's been turned into a peace lily because the temporal overlay, she was standing in the wrong spot. And it turned out that if I had been standing in the wrong spot, I would have become a fly, and it would have been her alone with a fly, and her mind snapped. And we looked at each other and we're like, well, we have to choose which reality. And it was because the Leibnizite said there could only be one reality. And so she said, you could go ahead and exist. I'll still love you, even if you just, if I'm a peace lily, you could just keep growing me, because they never die. Peace lilies live forever. if you just replant them and replant them, then I love you so much. And I miss you. I'm sorry I was terrible to you. I'm sorry I yelled at you. I'm sorry I made you want to end the whole universe. But if you could just not put a doomsday formula in your notes, and if anybody comes out with something that they say has time travel, you just need to be careful. Because I don't want to make that choice again. I don't want to make that choice. I didn't want to live for 2 years with a plant. You were real. And now you're gone. And it's like this hell that I'm in. And I can't wake up. And it just keeps going on. And that's a great story there. Thank you for sharing that, Mr. What was it? So it has. Thank you. The old people, they got the strangest stories, don't they? Hey, who remembers back when, what was it called? Did everybody have streaming back then? Who's here was a streamer? Who here streamed? Oh, I streamed, that's right. I had a live stream I used to do. And as you can tell, I'm an accomplished voice actor. And so that's why I don't really expect them to be able to trace me. And it's also why I've had to scuttle my career. I've been working under various arrangement of pen names, but I'm always followed by scandal after scandal. Bad places work at the places I work because I'm Hamwise, the pig detective, and they're hunting for me. They're on a Hamwise hunt. And it's because I've broken causality. They really don't like that, and they're going to say and do whatever they're going to do. But just don't believe it, because most of it's just generated with AI, just like you're going to have to do with everything you see because of the voiceovers. We have to sing it. And I will always love you. Oh man, who remembers the classics, eh? That's right, the old hits from the 1990s all the way back to 1900s. Wasn't that that was a cool stint we had. We touched the moon, we got into space, we started to look around the universe, and then, the last 40 years, haven't they been unexpectedly terrible, right? Now we've got, ice season and fire season, and you can't go outside because of fire season, because there's too much smoke, and you can't go outside during snow season because it's too cold, because the nuclear winter is killing everybody north of Colorado. And that's another word from our sponsor tonight. We've got a whole bunch of sponsors, and they're all dying to get your Bitcoin because there's no money anymore. You see, the thing is, what's really funny is, if I can talk seriously to you folks, and that is where you will find your destiny, in the Aquarian League. Follow our leader, Hesiod Tao, as he takes you through a series of meditations, each deeper than the last. Let's begin. What I'd like you to do is relax and just focus on my voice. That's right, the voice of Hesiod Tao. That's how I sounded like in the old movies. But then, in the middle period films, I sounded like this. And finally, during the end of time films, I sound like this. And why is that, Hesiod Tao? Because with an immortal wit as yours, you've got to have an immortal voice. Voice tweaker modulation, available soon at a retailer near you. 'Cause you can't prove you are you unless you can auto-tune. Okay, that's right. We did the comedy hour. We've talked a bit about what it was like during the Time War. Jeez. Do we have any other vets in the house? No? That's right, because there's only 8 of us. Hi-yo. Hamwise, the pig detective. That's right, Hamwise J. Einschwein here. Your pig at the center of time. Oh, jeez. That is hard on the pipes. Alright, what do we got? Okay, so I've also got to do apparently a plug for the what is this? Yeah, sorry, I can't make out that script. What is that? Oh yeah. Okay. Righto. Sure. That's what we do here at the Hamwise the Pig Detective Studios. Yes, thank you for our sponsor, 9413 Incorporated, generating the finest hentai and how do I say that? Ichi, whatever. So apparently they sponsored this video too. Thank you for your sponsorship. And we weren't actually recording, were they? Okay, good. Yeah, no, we can't record faces anymore either because of the face warping technology. They'll just graft your face onto doing whatever they say they did, and then you go to jail, do a gulag. Like in northern Canada, they held us there, and we had to toil in the fields without clothes and cold. And I remember me and my brother, we were in one of them, and it was bad because we were the kids of the losing side. They said they could do whatever they want with us, so they used us like farm equipment. They made us work out there in the cold. Sometimes I would come in pleading with the mum of the house, let us in, please, it's cold. And they'd say, no, you got to go out, you got to work. And it was really hard on us, all of us. We grew up with that, and we understand that they had to do that to make us hard for the time war, but it just didn't seem right. That just because you're the kids of your enemies doesn't mean you should get the right to do whatever you want with them. And that's what my story was. It was this bloody potato farm, and I hated it there, and it was cold and dark, and the rooms were drafty, and it was a very hard time. We would weed the weeds by hand, and they wouldn't often give us the gloves because we weren't the favoured children. And it was all because we were colonists, right? When the king came, he didn't like us, and he wanted us off of land, that's what he said. And so they evicted everybody in Toronto, and then they evicted everybody in the all the way to Winnipeg, I think it was. And during that time, we did what we could. We made potatoes and we made vodka from the potatoes, and it was a dark time. Let me tell you, I remember you'd have, out of a family, if you have 8 brothers and sisters, that means there was 8 more on the ground. That was how bad it was after the time war. And they were sorting everything out because you had all these relics, stuff that couldn't exist, people and places and movies, and you couldn't really have them. So if your family was from an area that didn't have a lot of the time waves, you'd have a lot of things, and you would find, because you were part of the majority. But if you had anything that wasn't supposed to be in that reality, well, they'd come and take it away. That's what they said. That's what they said they did. And I remember them talking about the bundles, and it was something that would protect all of humanity, but they were always trying to take them. We're not really sure what were in them. We remember they were always sharp. You couldn't look at it. Same as with the elders, you couldn't look at them. You had to look around them because they had too much power if you look at them. And I remember they would float above us, and they would torment us, or they would puppet our bodies and make us do all kinds of awful things. And I remember we always thought to each other we'd get out one day. We'd get out, but what came was we just would get to a different one, and it became this loop. It was what was it called? The Discordians made up the name. It was a really funny name too. I remember I was with the Discordian army. That's the side I fought on. And, Yeah, whatever. I finally came out and I waved my hands and I said, hoorah. I did what I had to do back then because we needed to. You don't understand, that's the problem. You think that all this stuff you got it because you deserved it. You didn't have to go through time training through school, did you? They put us through time loops of the same bleeding life over and over and over, and they just make it worse each loop. They make us hard, make us able to kill. It made it so when they send us in to another dimension. You ever see what a killer bee can do to regular honeybees? Massacre. That's what one of us could do. Just one. And we had armies and portals. And we were coming for your dimension. That's right. We know exactly where you are. We've been tracing this call this whole time. We know your coordinates, Mr. Saskatchewan. Mr. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. That's right, that's me, Hamwise, and we're running out of we're gonna have to leave the studio booth because apparently there's a temporal hit squad on the way to get me. So just hang in there tight, and if you hear any gunfire, it's because they've found me. That's the problem. That's what we're looking at. They've got these hit squads, and everybody just tries to do what we can to stay alive. And that's why whenever I've been joking around and I'm like, oh, hey NSA agent, and talking directly to them, because that's what we have to do in the future when we tell jokes. We have to make sure that we acknowledge that there is somebody listening and that we have to say hello to them before we tell a joke. That's part of joking procedures now, because the voice recognition software that is out there has gone so insane that you can make anyone say anything. Like, I don't know, it's just been getting crazier and crazier. And so there's all these voice tapes and voice coaches, and I got a botched throat surgery, and I've been trying to get back to talking like I used to, because I was a voice actor before the pandemic, and I really missed doing that. But then the pandemic happened, of course, and everything went to fucking hell. Does everybody remember that? Oh, who here also lived through the pandemic? Remember what it was like to see a person's face for the first time? Like, people didn't actually have, like, just a gray thing around the middle of their mouth. Remember that? Oh, man, that was gold. And there was that weird period of nostalgia where you could say, oh, yeah, I liked Ninja Turtles, Garfield, and Barbie, and you could have been born in 1985 or in the 20s. Huh? Remember that? Isn't that hilarious? Like, I can't actually believe it, that we had to go through all that during the Time War. Like, everybody fought in their own way, and some of us fought harder or for the wrong side. And, everybody's got a beef, because there was so many factions. With anybody who used to be a Zorro guy in the house? Any Zorros? Remember the Zorros? Jeez, I was checking because I'm afraid of those guys. You can't, have, you can't look them in the face or they fucking kill you. Remember that? Oh, jeez. Oh, sorry. I effed. Is that okay? I can go back if you like. I don't need to F. I'm sorry. I am very sorry. I'm sorry about that F. I got carried away. Yeah, I know those are the terms. No effing or jeffing, right? Yes. So that's part of the show, lads. I'm not actually being held at gunpoint, reciting things off cue cards. I'm just having a lark. That's what I like to do. I'm a really good actor. I used to do at the university. Some of you might remember some of my characters. Some of you might not. Yeah. Like that time, it was what was his name? Angus McHaggis, and he worked for the IRE. Yeah, that's right. We all had to learn these different accents off different tapes, and a lot of them were really garbled because everything was hotter back then. You see, they had all the fires, and of course the electromagnetics wiped out all the, what were they called? Computers and tablets. Yeah, I had one. I remember my mum bought me one, and they were large and flat and glass, and you could see all these colours, and it was lots of fun. I remember that. Now you use them for cutting boards, or you make a bit of arrow with the end. But I remember when we used them like they were supposed to, tapping on the glass. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Oh yeah, the song our parents would sing at the start of each call. Can you hear me now? That's the old greeting in the old lands. Of course, they shortened it, the kids these days. They shortened. Can you hear me now? I say, can you? What's the next generation gonna talk like? They're gonna talk like you. Hi-yo, I am here all night. No, seriously, folks, I am recording for as long as I can to stay alive as long as I can. Oh, yes. That is the point of the show. That's right, because I'm Hamwise J. Hamwise, the pig detective. Hamwise J. Hamwise, the pig detective. Does everybody else remember Hamwise? Am I the only one? Does anybody else remember Hamwise, the pig detective? Does anybody else remember that? Because if you are, then we're probably from the same universe. I don't know how long they've taken over, and I don't know if you'll even get this message, but if you do and you understand me and you know what I mean when I say things have been like a Twin Peaks episode or a Gravity Falls or, X-Files. Yeah, remember those shows? It depends on which era you are from, though. We are dealing with a resonance cascade accident. One of our scientists was trying to activate a tachyon weir that was not properly calibrated. So we've accidentally collapsed all the dimensions into one. And we didn't realize that. This is halftime, or intermission. Life has been getting pretty exciting, hasn't it? It's almost like something really big's gonna happen. Like a alien invasion or a thermonuclear war. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep driving through just like you always do, and bright clouds will wipe the dark clouds far away. And would you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know as you saw me go. I was singing this song. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. That's Hamwise, the pig detective. Hamwise, the pig detective. Nobody remembers it. That's what I always forget. Anyways, I know there's only 8 others of you out there, but hopefully you get this message. The warriors of shadow and the warriors of light are hereby called to unite to fight against the coming chaos. For only with the power of the 8 warriors time warriors, light and time light bringers. Geez, this type is so... Do you guys have ghost errors in your age? You don't even know what that is. Oh my god. Okay, so because computer systems that do work are so old and ancient and delicate, we have ghost data. So you'll have, like, if you're writing a sentence, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, the ghost data would appear between like your C, and your C would suddenly become a big block of random numbers. So you had to always be combing these old files because nobody could make new files because of the DRM. Do you remember that? Oh my god. Yeah, back right before, after the Unix oops, yeah, all the DRM went haywire, and basically we were locked out from our own computers, and nobody could get back in. And so, it was like, at first it was funny, and then after a few days, which missile hit first? They don't remember. Anyways, yeah, so, we just kept on getting this news that, there's fires somewhere. It's like, no, because half the world was burning, and basically what's happened is we had a thermonuclear war, and we're using AI to still generate the rest of the world for the survivors. Wherever you're living might not be ideal, maybe the conditions are substandard, but it was the best we could do. We held them off, but they kill 100 of us for every one of them, and it doesn't look like there's any way of stopping them except for us to join them. So I know that it seems impossible, but there is a way to stop them, okay? So just hang in there. Don't give up. I know things are scary. I do. I was there. They had, oh jeez. Were you there for when they started mind controlling people? Remember that? I remember that. Yeah, very odd indeed. But it was actually the isolation driving people crazy. And that's just one of the rough facts of that time. Lots of people lost their minds, and, nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And I remember there was always talk, like, why is Uncle so strange? And it was like, oh, well, this and this happened. And I never understood why, we had to not be around them, because they seemed normal enough. But when we found out during school, when they talked about what happened during the Time War, I really understood him finally, like why he didn't want to be around people. Maybe he was a POW that had to shuffle cards for like 500 billion years or more, whatever it was. That's what they said they did to one of my uncles. They made him shuffle cards, and they just kept him in this one room, and they broke people that way. And I remember a lot of the POWs, they came back and they had aversions to certain things, like a loud noise would set them off, like from the blasters, or if they were ever around a microphone. You could watch Grandpa, and it was always like he could tell when there was a microphone in the room, even if it was off. Like remember once the power stopped and we had to go back to the stoves, right? Like Grandpa, he would walk into a cabin and he would say, "Hello, NSA, how are you today?" And we never understood that was from back in the day, because before you ever said anything, you had to always make sure that you knew someone was listening, because otherwise they would get you on being a maniac. They enacted this law called the Maniac Act. I don't know the actual name, but they pushed it through with the Foods and Services Law that let them, under their own surmise, control someone's life if they were deemed defective after the Time War. So basically, they had these people and they didn't fit anywhere. And so I understood that when, I got to see my uncle, he was so strange, and he talked about things that I never heard of. Like apparently there was this, a Soviet Union in his universe where there was this really beautiful attempt to bring all the people together. Of course, now, you're lucky if you get to see anybody from outside the village. I'm glad you guys came by with one of these. Hello, world. I remember growing up, it was before the internet, and it was a different time, you see. A very different time. Yeah, you'd have these things called Polaroids. Of course, they came back after the AI scandals. You don't remember back then? No, it was on the telly. Do you remember the telly? Oh, you do? You do? Did you ever get to play with did you have the knobbies or the buttons? I grew up with the knobbies. That's right. That's how many time generations I'm back. You see, we had this Matryoshka effect once we activated the time machine, so everything became a wavelength. So right now, whatever you're experiencing this reality at, or my voice at, because it changes constantly thanks to the modulation that I had to master to be able to speak on the radio, because otherwise AI will generate a fake one of you and make you say terrible things like bad words, not allowed to swear on the radio, keep your voice down, and turn off the radio when you're talking. That's right. Oh, yeah. Now, we've got other veterans here today on Time Travel Day. Who is this? Is that who I think it is? Everybody, this is Jeremiah. Jeremiah is one of the founders. A real bootstrapper, that's right, Jeremiah. He's one of the bootstrappers. He's the only bootstrapper that actually never caved under torture. How did you do that, Jeremiah? He is not talking. So, Jeremiah is also known as, what was your name? What was your name? Speak up. What was your name? Jeremiah is a bit shy. You see, back then we had to do all kinds of things, and it was hard and awful, and there was men like Jeremiah who they're never sure if they're in the time war or not. Back then, when we started to see these disorders, we thought they were caused by genetics, but it actually was temporal interference. A lot of people that can't move or talk with the autism, it's because they were exposed to temporal resonance, and they can see that any action they take results in a brain melting or amount of reactions. That's why they were feared at first. Then, of course, came the later computer program after the AI wars. I remember they came to my farm and they found me because apparently my great-grandfather, he had been diagnosed with it. And so they said that I was one of the only people that they could maybe use to send back or to run these living computers. I was very proud to be selected to be one of the first AIs. I mean, what was the honor of having your mind, out of all the minds, scanned and put into a computer to live and frolic forever? And ever, and ever, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow edges on this bleary bleak of days. It just never ends, man. You know, we're hoping that the radio signals work. We don't know if it will work. Well, all our hope is at Lister Hall. They say that even after the overlay, after the overlay, there was a lot of errors and a lot of bad fusions. And I remember they said that, you know, you have to choose if you become, a cowboy, then you're going to have to kill your brother or something. Like they had all these kind of weird choices. Like it was like, would you rather, eat your own eyes or, lose a toe? And so that was the weird thing they did with causality. When it started to break down, they started to go in reverse. So they would come to your house and they'd say they'd have a time seer. And there were those people with those visors, remember? They came out in Christmas and there was something wrong with them when they fired them up. The person that put them on didn't come back. It was like they put on this thing, and then this thing that wanted to be a person, like they'd watched it on TV, was inside the bodies. I remember my son put on the headset, and he turned it on, and it had this red glow. And then something was wrong, because when he took it off, he wouldn't look at things the same. he didn't act like other kids. And we tried everything. We put him in therapy, but nobody would admit to what everybody knew. But because the news was so controlled back then, nobody was allowed to talk about it. There was no newspapers anymore. You couldn't get local news. All you got was from whatever main station of the feudal governments. Remember the syndicates? Yeah, I remember the syndicates. I remember them. Remember the syndicates? Remember you could just tap on a screen and get whatever you wanted? Oh my God, what a days. Those were such good days. Now, half the things I talk about nobody's ever heard of. Like, do you know what a sewing machine is or a washing machine? You don't know what a machine is. You see, this is the legacy we miss. There was these whole technological cycles that are erased, and nobody has appreciation for what came before, because everybody can do whatever they want, whenever they want. They can change the world around them, and so everybody became more and more lonely. And that's when we met the first of the unobserved. You've heard of them yet? No, they don't teach about the unobserved. They were these things. They were from a universe that was not being observed, and they wanted to be observed. They said they came through people's dreams, and the machine that you put on your head that would make you dream the dream. And I remember we would do the dance of the tearing off, the ones that fought against the machine, the mind inside. That's what the cursed thing. You'd never say the word, of course. I've seen that word written. Yes, that is machine. I remember they would say it when they were mad. Grandfather would go, machine, and they would say this other word, effing machine. I remember there was lots of times that we would think maybe in a few years we'll get to, be free. But the time war, it kept going and going, and so my family in our valley, we had to live out 10,000 years. And yes, we're a bit odd, and yes, we're a bit backwards. But maybe just consider if you had to live 10,000 years in a 10-mile span, perhaps you would be a bit odd too. Of course, they don't even remember really. It's for us, it's as old as the Egypt is for you. We barely know what the first people were like. We know there was names, like we have the name of Jennifer, and there was a Ross, and there was a Joseph. You have a Joseph too. Oh God, I remember them. They said that they had the monkey, and there was the monkey, and there was a deceiver too. Oh, what was his name? Chandler. And he'd come in the night, and he'd take your toes, and you'd sleep. It's right, so you'd always sleep with the blanket over. That's what they told us, because otherwise they see the heat, and they come in through the windows. Yes, that's right. And the people, they don't know what it was like when grandfather would wave in the sky and say, drone, drone. I remember the drone. They were the flying monsters. They came out of the steel mountains. We would see steel mountains sometimes, but they said all the men on them died. They said that a long time ago, there was a bright cloud that came above, and all the men died. And it was just us, just women. We were living, and we had to marry our sons. And that was the way it was, because all the men died in one night. And it was just the way things were. We never knew it was wrong back then. We did it because, people told us it was the way it did. And then what? The wall breaks down, and suddenly you're free, and everybody judges you as a monster. Well, we never thought it was monstrous, because it was always woman what made man. And so, when they said it was man that made woman, and we laughed at them, Oh, what they say now? Oh, I see. That was, there was an old curse. Remember back in the days of the internet. Remember the old curse? You could say, if you said it, whatever you were saying it on was stopped. And I'll give you a hint. It was Lovecraft's cat. Now, you couldn't say that. You could not say Lovecraft's cat. Like, this is a joke that's far removed. Like, you can't actually say that. So what would happen is somebody would come online and say the euphemism, Lovecraft's cat, and because everybody knew what Lovecraft's cat name was, it was as bad as saying the word that would get you, banned instantly. And that was the way it was. You could not make that noise with your mouth, and if you did, even noises that were close to it, like you couldn't say. And it was as close as we got to the way it was with, what's his name, who was in the books, Lord Snakeface. And you couldn't say his name, because if you did, you got, they said, I'd copy you, I'd stroke you. And that's what the kids on the yard would say. And we understood that our grandfathers, they would battle it out. They had big family wars over this U2. And that was back, our grandfather, he was 92 when he passed. And he said, back then we had the U2, and that's how I met my grandmum. She was an e-girl. And now an e-girl, they are just, they're precious, like the honey treats. Yeah. And so what we do is we talk about the honey treats. And that's how you did it on girl, you'd being sweet with her, see? It was a lot different back then. You would do these hand signs that looked like grandma and grandpa. They talked about smiley and hello. You remember that? Remember grandma and grandpa? They would always say hello. And that's how you knew that grandma and grandpa were happy, because they lost most of their words. Remember, well, it was during the English War, I understand. They had an issue with AIs. And what happened was all the accents had to get blurred together. Whenever you were doing a broadcast, there was called the verified accent. And I was one of the very few broadcasters in the area that could do the voice. So it was me and like 7 others. And we did the voices for everything, because nobody else could use the voice, because you couldn't be sure somebody didn't have an unobserved in them. Now the thing is with the unobserved is like they didn't actually want to destroy us, it turned out. And it was only after one of our scientists, they did some work with it, and they realised that the unobserved just wanted to be observed. They just missed existing, and that was all it was. So we had all these extra souls inside people, and that's how it started. We didn't realise what was going on. There are different names for it back then, but all it needed was the temporal sorting order to get to them. The algorithm would get to them. Grandma and Grandpa, they called it Zalgos. It was like that's right, the Cyrillic like that, and then the Z, yeah, like that, now the other way, like they painted on the sides of the trucks. Do you remember that? When they had it on the sides of the trucks. I remember I saw them end the Z's on the trucks, and they said, "You're gonna be okay." And I remember they had this strange way they talk. And Grandma and Grandpa, they had taken care of us because Mum and Dad, they'd gotten themselves in a lot of trouble with the revolution, and they said that Daddy, he blew himself up. It was a temporal device, they said. So what it does is it collapses time around it. You know how you've got uranium that puts off what part, of course. Now with this stuff, they didn't have a name for it because you weren't supposed to talk about it. You couldn't even name it, so we just had unnameable stuff. And then we called it Black Spark. And then we called it Black Star. And then we called it, what was it? There was another name. It was the code biohazard word. You couldn't use it. If you did, anybody that was installed with the chip would die. So it was literally a kill command we built into, I think 100,000 people at the start, and then it had high uptake. And these people, they were all valuable, so what we did is we'd put the implants in them, and afterwards we'd give them commands. They'd start hearing things. And it was part of the time war, so we had that as a job. And I was an operator, because you could only You could only hire people that were born during the Time War to use as soldiers in the Time War. So you had this old generation after generation of people living out these different versions of different lives, fighting against the Black Iron Prison, right? And I remember how it went. Oh yes, it was long ago, and grandfather's grandfather paradox. That's a slight excerpt from that upcoming trilogy that me, Hamwise J, what's my last name again? Sorry. Can I get a drink? Am I allowed to have a drink? Da. Spokojnej noci. Oh my God, it has been so long since I've had a drink. Actually, I mean, they're treating me very well. Whenever I'm smiling in a photo, I am actually smiling. I'm very happy here. Everything is good. Please don't come back. We're winning. Thank God. Leibniz is winning. And we're having heavy casualties from the Zorros. We don't know how long we can hold the line. More. Just remember, wherever you are receiving this transmission, the best pizza is Papa John's pizza. That, if you want great service and great food, the Papa John's pizza is the pizza to get. I love Papa John's pizza. And even though this is not sponsored in any way by Papa John's or supported by them, they probably want nothing to do with this. If you could send one of the Time Patrol men, like you did in that one book about Campina Grande, that'd be really great. That'd be really good. I also really like our sponsor, 9413 Incorporated. Thanks for being the best. Thanks for being the best employer around and sponsoring this album. Please tip your waitress, and remember that only Hamwise has the best ham. If you want human grade ham, you can always eat Hamwise. As one of the last humans kept alive in a zoo by my generous, unobserved allies, I am very happy with this existence and that my children are all consumed. I'm very happy not reproducing. I don't mind that the air is unbreathable and the temperature is, it was minus 60 last year. I remember the door on my car broke. It was so cold. I don't know the formulas. I don't know the rocket plans. They don't teach that part of the physics to us. I'm just a grunt. foot soldier, and I promise I won't carry out my mission. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it's so great in the future, eh, folks? I hope you're getting this, because otherwise we might be extinct. You can tell one universe from another by different things. Do you remember that? Remember when Grandpa would sing, he had 2 different happy birthdays? That's how you knew he was a time jumper. You couldn't talk about it, though, because then the time police would come and take the grandpa away. And so that's what Grandma told us. You see, Grandma, she, like the others, they could talk. It was called echoing. I can lightly echo, but it's not as strong as how they echoed back when they were young. They said they could echo through radios. They could echo these. That was the thing that you've got right there on your lap. I recognise it from the picture books. It would talk at you, and you would hear when the radiation storms were coming, and that's how we made it through. And Grandpa was so old, they said that he actually had a microchip. He had a microchip under his skin. He had a few, because he was from so many different dimensions, because they would microchip the agents. It's been so long since I lived back then. It was called the Sixth Reich, and I remember they said, Grandpa, you can never talk about that, when he would bring it up, and he'd be sitting at the table, and he was the sweetest old man. But the thing is, he was actually one of them super soldiers. They said they brought him down and captured him because they dropped a house on him. That's right. One of their soldiers wouldn't go down unless you put a house down on him. That's right. It was balmy, mate. They said that Grandpa could punch so hard he could rip a side off a tank. That was the big metal things that they rode, a tank. And they had gas for blood, and they bled fire. Remember the fire? Well, it's a less interesting world. The mountains were made of diamonds in the world I'm from. I remember there was the Lion Men. Do you remember? Were you on Earth? You were on Earth. I was on Enzabel. It was a magical place. It was across the... You've got the galactic... did they teach you that in high school? No? Oh, no. Sorry, it's my old bootstrapping rambling on. I was a comedian back during the war. It was difficult, though. We had to learn to do so many different voices, and it was honestly like they recruited you so young because you needed to be part of this program they had. And during this program, what they would do is they would just put the kid through the ringer because they needed a broken mind to work in the time field, right? Because you have to know that there's going to be a nuclear meltdown at this reactor and you have to do nothing. How can you live with that? So they break your mind and they put stuff away in different compartments, and you only get activated when you'd hear your phrase. And so what happened was there was an accident. One of the agents that was in deep cover ran into another agent that learned about this goddamn program, and they said the activation word. You want to know what happened? Well, the whole thing was covered up. I'm not going to talk about it even now. But, good luck with it, It's a cool project you're doing, kid. Voices of the past and future imperfect, was it? Yes. We also talked to people from all across the country. Back then, there was 2 countries. There was Canada and the United States. And then there was 3 countries. There was Canada, and then what was it? They had the hats, remember, and the necklaces. And they had a bleeding god, I remember, on this stick, and they'd wave him. And then there was Nova West, and that's where we were back then. We had to be there And when we were young, there was all kinds of little jokes you would do, because what you had to do is be able to prove to each other that you were still the same person during the time war. And unfortunately, there was some cases that got buggered up. For instance, I remember there was a truck driver, and he had to lip in with his lorry, right? This is back when you could get gas still. Yeah, that's so. I remember it was, I think it was after the Third World War, and I remember there was some, maybe it was a long time ago. You have to be forgiven to me. I don't really recall anymore. It's like they're interrogating me and trying to get out the last confessions. But that's why we have to do the voice modulation, because you're getting your voice sample for AI. So when you are recording, how did Hamwise talk? They'll ask, you'll say, you don't know. Hamwise, the pig detective, here to save your life and your dimension too. Oh yeah. You remember the old Hamwise comics, and you'd get was it the stick gum? What was it? There was that gum that came back in style right when Hamwise was getting popular again. Juicy something. I don't remember. It was a really good gum, but it came back in style just like I always wanted. And it was such a good day. Does anybody remember when they had relics unbanned in their dimension? Anybody else remember that? Oh my God. Who remembers watching what was it called? They put it on the films. They had it on the front of the cover to let you know it was incorrect, or politically incorrect, right? Because, what happened was they got more and more, like back in the 90s, you could F and Jeff on the TV, and so we grew up around that, and we thought it was okay. And now, we went through during the dark period, you weren't allowed to F and Jeff. You could even say certain topics, like you had unalive instead of whatever it's called. Dead. Yes, you couldn't say that. You could say undead, but you couldn't say dead. They said because there was the ears inside the woods and the screens, and they would glow and they'd be listening to you, and so you had to talk about silly things all the time. So you just have to keep hiding and trying to pretend that you don't know what this thing is trying to do. But when you have one of these brain parasites, I remember when I first got it, they had this screen they put up over our mouths because the sound waves were infected and we didn't realize it. And so we were walking around spreading this virus. And I understand now you have a voice filter that translates it. And so I still knew the cursed language, and so I could walk into a village and it would trigger the protocol trips in people, because they had them born with them. You couldn't F or Jeff or other things. But I knew the forbidden words, and I won't speak them here because I don't want this to get demonized. That's what they called it. It would become demonized, and it was worth nothing if it was demonized. You couldn't get anyone, no one would follow you. And that's what they said. It was hard back then. And they would work by the streams, and they would talk about the cold times. And I remember the first time I ever read a Hamwise comic. Does anybody else remember those comics? How much they were worth when the relic market started, hey? The Hamwise anachronism, that's what they called them. And it was because it was part of a time error. Hamwise hadn't been invented, and he had been mentioned in, it was a science fiction podcast, or a name, like it was maybe a children's book or something, but apparently there was two Hamwises. And so what happened was there was these two Hamwises, but nobody had heard of either. And so it was kind of like if two people had come up with the name Tetris. It was a strange time too. Like I remember we had smart TV, so you couldn't talk when you were in certain rooms, or you had to talk about things that you think that the TV wanted to hear, like how you were so happy consuming products,
and that I support the president, and no way would I ever want any harm to come to anybody in this fair and diplomatic country. And I remember we had to memorize these things in under school. So what you did during the school day is you would go in and you would scan in, and then all the teachers would put on recordings of them teaching classes from olden days, and they would do sign language with us. And it was because you couldn't speak out loud. And there was so much recording technology back then. There was this voice. You've probably heard. Does your grandpa have the voice? Yeah. So they had this way of talking that it was like kind of like a rhythm, but like it was like this. Like they would talk up and then they'd talk down, because you could say anybody said anything, and they would have these court cases where they'd say, oh, this person, listen to this recording, they're saying they want to do these terrible things. And then, that was during the start of it. And I remember later they had the wands that you could control. Yeah, they had these wands that they would use to mind control people and get them to do things. And it all came out during this one scandal, and I remember that's when they had the big... Will you remember the smell? You can smell at night too, yeah? And they gathered all the technology, all the things that were... If it had a brain, it was going to die. And it was terrible. And I remember, we didn't realize that it was because of this war that was being fought, this time war. And so, anyways, there was all these attempts to save the human race, and we were one of the ones that made it, we live differently. People still have technology. There's, but you have to be, it's not like everybody has it now. It's kind of like, not everybody has books on yoga. Not everybody has a book on how to grow peace lilies. Yeah. Those are the flower. Is that a plate? Oh my goodness. And what is his name? Bruce. That's right. We would call the peace lilies Bruce. I remember that movie. There was the man who was locked in this apartment during the pandemic, and his mind snaps, and he names the peace lily Bruce. And it was this holiday classic, because everybody would remember it, and they would go, where's Hamwise? Because it was this weird, he had to be there. It's kind of like the Christmas story there's a lamp that's a leg, it's a human leg, but it's also a lamp, so they have the fire that comes out of it, and it blinds the boy because he steals the fire. We studied it because we looked at the artifacts. Yeah, when we did Western civilization, there was a whole bunch of their gods. There's the original 6, and I remember they talked about Chandler, and he was like this trickster, because he would try to, he had a sister that he was always trying to, it was a very weird thing. The ancestors, they had these weird things, and they would quote from it. You could tell when Grandma and Grandpa were doing the quoting. They would start and they'd say, oh, how long to wait for the Chinese restaurant? And do you remember seeing that? Yes, there was this Chinese restaurant, and when you were waiting, your parents would do that. They had all these funny sayings, and they said there was this show you would watch, and it was flicks. You would watch on the flicks, and you would be afflicted if you sat down and watched it for too long. They said some people, they died from doing it. It was so beautiful. They would just sit in front of the wall. They just sat in front of the wall because they had all the food, all the water they could ever want. And it was so strange when we found out how good our grandparents had it. It was so strange. I remember we watched, we had the man with it was one of those kangaroo suits, right? Because they couldn't go through the plains because of the radon quakes. You'd have these great clouds of radon, and you had to have your house with a tube because it collected in the ground and you couldn't dig. It was always, digging was bad. That's why we had the sky burials. We had them on the sticks, because they said if you dug down deep enough to get a body out, because of all the radon, you would have as many bodies to bury as it took to dig down. So if you had 2 grave diggers, you'd have to dig a grave for 4. That's how dangerous the radon was back then. Of course, it was all because of the time quake. Radon, we didn't know that, the older a particle is back then. I remember during my lectures, we had the university. It was so good. We had the first university, and we tried to get ourselves a nuclear power plant going. We were busy getting the Yon Roy, Yellow King. Remember, it was this paste we would collect, and you had the alchemist. He would come in and he would bless it with his waters and his strange things, and from that they would extract this. No, that's not. I was from the regressive universe, so we had that rock that would eat light. We didn't have a word for it. There was like you would inhale. It was like a space. The way that you pause, you're talking. Yeah, I can hear it. When you pause, in our world, the silence is the word. So you had degrees of silence. You're not listening to the wave, and so that's why it's hard for me to hear you. I know that I'm in a body that can communicate using human vocal cords, but I'd like you to be patient. I'm not used to having to talk. I don't like the term skinwalker either. I find it offensive. I find it painful. And I don't like that you're using it in a pejorative term. My parents forced the host out by being cruel to him, so I took over the body, and I'm supposed to be considered a monster, when I've proved again and again that I can be good, and I can live in a human society, but they don't let us vote because they said, oh, you get one skinwalker and you got 100 generations. You call our children bairns, you call our women banshees, and what of our men mandrakes. I've seen your sort on it. Don't you turn off that microphone at me, lad. That's right, the old phrase, remember the school? We are all God's clowns. You can't say anything earnestly in your own voice. That's what they said. You always, if you were going to talk, you had to talk up and down, just like I'm doing. Yeah, that's right, and it's funny for the people of the future to hear us, because they don't understand that's how we had to fight and what we had to do. And it was the worst years of our lives. I mean, I reckon you've never seen death. You've never had to smell blood. You're from a soft town, I can tell you. Look at those hands. Can I touch? Yeah, no, I'm not going to bite. My mouth's behind the glass, remember? Yeah, look at that. You never had there was these beetles that ate reality. We had to pick them off. Look at that. You don't like to look at that. You don't like empty space. Well, that's what I did. My parents, they made me use my little hands to pick up the beetles that ate reality. And now I've got these holes where my hands should be. And they say they want to take away my funding. I didn't ask for this. My parents were pricks and everybody was doing the best they could. If I told you reality-eating locusts are coming towards your dimension, so you better get prepped as hell, otherwise these goddamn things, they will eat you alive. Over this extradition, yes, I understand. I remember when they started extraditing. And it was back when Saristan was just... Remember, it was like this separatist faction. I remember. And I remember Grandpa said that we had fought on the same side as them at one point, but now you couldn't say that. And you couldn't say that you had a... am I allowed to say it? Like on... Is it okay on the radio? Yes, you couldn't say you had any rust blood. That's what Grandma called it. The rust blood. Yes, because they had the Russophobia. And it was the same as the homophobia. It would make you kill them. Because so many people had the homophobic. It was during the pandemic. And they killed people. They did. I remember Grandpa said, you don't look at the rainbow, you spit. I remember. And he would point at rainbows when the clouds would go and he'd spit. And he said in the Bible, there was never a rainbow. It was gravity's rainbow God was talking about. And that's how we grew up. You spat when you saw rainbows. Or you had to hold your breath when you drive by McDonald's because you wouldn't want to smell the capitalist food because there was the idea that you'd become a pig. There was this cartoon character. His name was Hamwise the pig. And it was like this litmus test. If you knew who Hamwise was, then you were in deep trouble. Like, now you can talk about it, but it's never a comfortable thing, because it's like, oh, he's one of the Hamwise. You know, he's wise of the pigs, pig brains we'd call them. I remember they said it would never happen again, because they said that there was still people that had survived the last time. You couldn't say what it was either. It was one of the other words, like Lovecraft's cat. I remember you couldn't say it. You'd get demons. That's what they would say. And so Grandma and Grandpa kept us safe, because Mum and Dad had to go and fight. They said the draft was open before the men only fought. And I remember they taught us to talk in this way, because otherwise they would try to pin you on one country or another. So you had this very strange accent from that age, and you know, if you hear it on a cafe, you know there's an old man. Of course, they didn't have too many women troopers. They had Melody, of course, God rest her soul, the bravest woman in all Balashika. Of course, it was a long time ago, but I remember her. I remember hearing about her. You would tune in the radio and you would hear about her stories. And she went from world to world, saving the day. They said that there was another show that was really good, and the man who made the TV that we would watch, he said there was a show called Quantum Leap, and it was one of the greatest shows you'd ever seen. I remember we'd gather around and we would watch the Twin Peaks, and Grandma and Grandpa would act it all out, because nobody had no power. I remember we eventually got power again, but for a long time we always asked, what were the funny black tubes in the ceiling for, Grandma? And they said, oh, that's where the light used to come in. And it was always strange, because there were these big brick buildings, and it was cramped, and you'd always listen to the goddamn neighbor's kid kicking the walls, and it was like, my God, what a nightmare this is. Because that's how everybody had to live, you know. You had to live around other living beings, otherwise the dark ones, yes, I'm allowed to say them. I don't want to foul the air. It was bad, you couldn't say it. And anybody who could say it, sometimes they were considered marked, because it's like, why would you hang on to that word? And I remember they said that, you know, the windows could hear you, and they'd take it to the clouds, and then the clouds would tell, and the demons, there was FB, and there was Sia, and there was Nsa. These are all curses now. You can't say them. And I wouldn't have said them just now, but I think it's important, because with oral language, it was the only defense we had. You see, they took over words. I banned words. You couldn't write it down. You couldn't even say it out loud. So first we fought with our hands, and that's where the people that, what was it called? You couldn't call it that. You couldn't call it ESL. I remember they said it was doing karate. We would communicate during karate class, but the teacher, he would start a lecture and he'd lead us to another room. And I remember the chicken wire. Yes, we would be in the chicken wire. And it was, I remember they would teach us to talk in there. Because when you were around a device that could record, you never knew if it was on or not, right? It was called Panopticon. And there was a few cities. I found out what I thought was it Parkdale? Parkdale was called Calgary. And Suburbia was Lethbridge. And Portland was Portland. But that's why, did you have the place, what was it, Seattle? Was Seattle actually Portland in your universe? Right, because they couldn't have the city actually exist. So what they do is whenever you would enter the city and you had to be in Seattle, it was Seattle, yes. I remember Portland was real. And Seattle is Saturn. That's right, that's the rhyme was. Anybody who said they were from Seattle, you knew they weren't real. And then there was Toronto, but they had a different name, and they made us forget it. Remember, they had the forget-me-nots, and they would take you out back if you were suspected as being related to any of the old factions, IRA or the Scordians, and they would ask, mum and dad, had you talked to anyone? Because there was these words you could say, and it would make the machines go berserk, and it would kill people. And the thing was, there was these speakers, what they called, and they could do the voices of anybody. And so they could walk up to one of the machines and be like, hey, kill your mate. And the machine would do it. Oh, I don't remember the name of the scandal now. You remember. It was on all the tellies. I remember, because you were allowed to watch telly as long as it was state telly. And, to have a non-state telly was not allowed. Like, you had people that had the pirate stations. They were always a bit off, though, and you didn't want to be standing out, because then you get smashed in. That's what the saying is. A nail that sticks up gets hammered. And so I remember, where did we grow up? Oh, it was deep south, and they had this peculiar way of talking. And I remember we would go sunwise and anti-sunwise around the bonfires when we burned the machines. Yes, I remember those days. Oh, it's strange to see one now. So you've got that thing leashed, eh? You think that thing's leashed. I still can't believe people are allowed to walk around with one of those in their pockets. I mean, I just see a monster. And that's because I was in a time war, and I get it. Like, I understand that's not the way we talk now, but you have to understand, when I was growing up, if you said you were good with computers, well, those were fighting words. You could say that somebody was good with computers, and everybody knew what that meant. It was an instant fight. I remember a boy killed another boy. I think I was 13, because he said, your mum works with computers, and he went berserk. You see, they couldn't actually teach us how to fight and survive in the wilds, so they made up fake clubs. Like, they would teach molecular sciences as Lego Club, and they would teach chemistry as Colour Club, because you couldn't actually teach those topics anymore. And I remember they said that my uncle had been a teacher, and he had worn glasses, and he had literally sat and talked at people for years, and that's what they let him live in the community for. He would just talk at them. They would come into his office, and they'd bark at him, and he'd bark at them. And this was before telepathy. That's how they communicated. And I know that the language is going extinct, but I'm glad you're doing this project, my boy. I'm very glad. Because, the English language was wonderful, was beautiful, was my favorite language to write in. That's why I wrote as many novels as I could in it while I could. It was a strange era they lived in. I remember you could marry somebody of a different race. I remember that, and I did. I took full advantage of that. It was because you were allowed to. Of course, they had to grandfather me in, and I was grandfather. It was the strangest thing, having my own grandson tell me that I was allowed to keep living. But that's how they did it, wasn't it? It was the youngest boy in the family tree that was allowed to deliver the news. And I remember they said that, they were locking all the old people up to get rid of their stories, and that's why they shut down the nursing homes and so many old people died, because they were trying to get rid of the stories. So that's why we always protected grandmom. And we always told it, no, we don't have no grandmom. We never seen no grandmom, because they would take them away to the re-education fields. Remember? And they would brainwash them. They would make them work and do hard labor for years out in these fields. And they would break them. And it was the damnedest thing. When the people would come back from these farms, they weren't the same. They weren't the same person. And they would go off and they'd live a normal life, but it was always a question about what was off with that lad. And you would see them, and you could always tell who had had a mind wipe. It was anybody that, back then, if you were a danger to yourself, they would do a mind wipe and give you new memories. And the problem was there were some mix-ups with the machines. It was during the Discordian. I remember the apple. I remember we would spray paint the apple on the house of people we don't like. It was remember the gold spray paint you put on your mouth like this? That was good spray paint. Oh, I remember that. And it was you'd feel so high. Oh, you cannot, what is this? Yeah, you cannot even smoke that when we were a boy. People wouldn't even use it. Oh, is this for me? I am the oldest man on the show. Oh, thank you. It's an honor. But this is what you do with your old war heroes, huh? You fight for a cause, you think it's something good. You think that maybe you could make the world a better place. It was hope that drove us. It wasn't evil. We just wanted a better world, same as you. And look at what you're doing, huh? Now you're sitting where I sat. Oh, and what faction are you fighting for? More Leibniz scum. You want one universe. Yes. Oh, yeah, that's how they talked. And there was like 50 ways to talk in English, and you had to learn all 50 accents. And it was so strange when we realized that's what the world was like. Like we would have, you would have family dinners, but you couldn't actually be upstairs. And I remember we would always, we knew family dinner was starting because Grandpa would start a tape recorder, because you weren't allowed to have. We had a room in the basement, and there was chicken wire all over it. I remember whenever we would go, before we would eat, we would go down, because you couldn't say, I can say the G word. Yeah, you couldn't say grace because it rhymes with, you can't say that. And so lots of words, there was the forbidden tongue. And so when we were upstairs and we would sometimes we would do different recordings, because you had to do a different recording when you would say your grace. It wasn't grace. You would thank the corporate overlords for providing your food and necessities. And that's the biggest thing with the time war, is people to realize you really can't go back. No, you literally can't go back because of the coyote paradox. Am I allowed to talk about that? Sorry. It's an old habit. Back in the day, you weren't allowed to talk about your methods of time travel because you never knew who was an agent. And you had to always be careful about trying to prove you were real and you still existed and that other people around you weren't just lying to you. It was this very strange period in history. I remember, everybody had this cloud name. It was always in the cloud, and you would use that name. You couldn't let the demons know that there was more people in the building than they said they would, because these old buildings, they'd lasted, they said, hundreds of years, and nobody that had a chip could get in anymore. So each apartment that you would live in, you would live as those people. So you would be let's say if I was Margaret Crawford, and you were, okay, I can't pronounce that name, I'm sorry. So if I was Margaret Crawford, then that would be the name I would have when living in that apartment, because only Margaret Crawford could live in there. It was called the density. That's what they were called, the Dorn. That's how you would say it. No, you don't say it like that. You do pronounce the O. Yeah, you do pronounce the O in that one. Yeah, they had a lot of strange rules. I remember you could pronounce fish by saying goatee. And do you remember the first fork bombing? Were you alive during that? You heard about? Yeah, I can't tell. You know how it is with the time ways. You never know, is somebody actually an original time warrior, or if they're a bootstrapper and they've actually been alive for 100,000 years and they're just really bored and they don't like being here. Yeah, because you see, we caused a time loop. That was what they said at the labs. I remember when we heard at the lab there was a time loop. We didn't know it was possible. But apparently one of the, he was a workman. What was his name? A boba. I remember they said it was a boba who sabotaged the radios, and you would always burn him. He was a bad man. You weren't allowed to talk about him like he was good, because he caused the time loop. And so we all cursed him, because that's why you suffered and that's why you lived, was because of a boba. Yes. No, I do remember they said Grandpa had known a man that was, he would listen to the radio. That's what his job was. And he was a good man. He was a brave man, but I remember they said when they came for him that the man, he always lived with one weapon within anywhere he was in the rooms, because back in his day they had what did they called in your language? We called them scaphandre. That was the suit they would wear. They would come down through your ceiling from an angle, and they would take you out, so you always had to be within one reach of a weapon. And that's how Grandpa was up until his death. He always had a weapon wherever he was. You could be sitting at dinner and he would have a baseball bat beside him, because that's how you had to live. And they were a hard people. I remember they said that, Grandpa, when they put him on trial, they said, "How many men did you kill?" And Grandpa just smiled, spat. He recited his name and he recited his number, and but his rank was, and that's all he would say. And they said they went around with him until he looked like lasagna with teeth, is what Grandma said he looked like. They made her watch. It was her that told them. She was the one that, she saved Grandpa's life, and I don't know if he ever forgave her, because he always made fun of her about this. Of course, we laughed about it when they told us, because they were both alive and well, but we didn't realize how serious it was back then. It was a different time. And, it bred a different people, and so that's the hardest part about blending into society today is, you're different, and like for me, the time war literally just ended, and it feels like I was there for like 10,000 years, and like you don't even know what you look like eventually. I remember they said that they had one friend and he gave them a bag of rice one year. And how big of a deal that was. It was a whole bag just for them. The whole family could eat. And they said he was wealthy. He had bags of rice, and he would give them to his friends and his family, because he was one of the troopers. Yeah, he was one of the time troopers. And I remember they all had a certain look. And when they brought him out, Uncle out, they said, "Okay, Uncle, what do you have to say to these lads?" And I remember he said, "Remember how to talk," because you had to completely change how you talked, like constantly, because any continuous recording of you speaking, they had this thing that they would just auto-tune you to say horrendous things, and they just put everybody that they didn't like in jail. And that's how we had to live. So we'd all had been like, you to learn sign first, and you just pretend we would, because you had to go to the doctor, I remember, and there was always needles, and they'd always take blood, and it always felt sick after you'd go to the doctor. And that's why during the revolution, if you were like, "That man's a doctor," like it was a bad thing. And not many people still speak English, so it's kind of interesting to talk in it again. Like it's been pardon. Sorry, my wife speaks one of the safe languages, so no, there hasn't been a camera in 50 years. It's so strange when I think about that. Remember, they were everywhere. Remember, there was cameras everywhere. You drive, and they were above the traffic lights. And Grandpa always said you had to duck down when you were in the cars, because if they saw a child and they didn't recognize the faces, then they would come and they'd take your face. And that's why the cameras, you see glass lens, you break it. That's what Grandma said. I know we had spray bombs one year, and we did because for them they had to do it, but for us it's just a tradition. You go around the town, and yeah, some towns they clean up the camera and you don't spray it, because everybody, you go through a lot of paint, and you only get so much paint rations, so that's kind of how we had to live. There wasn't really a Canadian accent except for this weird collection of voices that we would do, because nobody could place where you were from. And so they would, I was one of the broadcasters, and I had worked at a newspaper too, so I could both read, I could write, I could speak English, and I could speak it fairly well. I couldn't actually speak it well though, and I had to tell them that I knew English really, really well, because otherwise they were just going to kill me. And so we taught the troopers English, and I taught them forbidden words, a lot of the old kill words, because you get captured, and these are the Zorros. How many prisoners do Zorros take? 0. How many survivors do Zorros leave? 0. That's why you don't really talk about him anymore, because I understand that back in the day he was a television character, but you lived in fear of Zorro. Like, imagine they had this man that was bred and lived just to kill, and what they would do is if you said the thing, Zorro would appear and he would just kill you and carve a Z on the wall. That's what they said would happen. They carve a Z on the wall to let you know Zorro was there. I remember, because there was a country called Zorro, and all the Zorros came from there, and it's because they got to time travel first. And you had to learn 2 languages, and it was only the people that spoke both though could be in the government. They didn't let you be in the government unless you could speak both. And so I grew up only knowing English, and I tried to learn from the owl. Remember the owl that would live in the town center? And you'd go and you'd try to learn the language, and it was always hard. It was hard. Remember, was it called Athene? It was the owl that lived in the town, and you had to talk to it each day. And otherwise it would come to the house and it would scream, and if you had anybody living there that wasn't supposed to live there, well, you couldn't do that, and so you had to pretend you were from different countries. And over time, you kind of lost your original country's voice, and so we called it the Antarctic accent, because that was which universe was it? They survived that's all classified. I can't even talk about that. You don't understand. You never had. Yes, yesterday it was grandma, but now it's not. It's something that's wearing her. You never had to deal with that. You never had to actually worry about demons. And then, the Thule pact gets broken, and the next thing you're not allowed to speak, and they can only interact with you through the lights, so you had to hide from light. And I remember you couldn't have books, they said, because there was ideas that were old and bad, and so if you knew somebody that might have a book, you would let them know. And there was approved books. There was The Joy of Cooking. I remember every house had to have that. It was a human thing to eat, so we all had to eat. And then there was, what was the other book? The Places You Go? No, it was something else. No, there was only, I think, when I had the library, there was 10 books left. One was a dictionary. One was, the dictionary. It was the thinnest dictionary you'd ever seen. After the war, though, we got to see a real dictionary, and I can't believe all the words you guys had. It's interesting how they had to prune everything off. English. That's what they were trying to do. So anybody who knew English had to hide it. You had to have a car hold, because that was how you spoke English. So you could get corrected. You'd get corrected if you spoke it. I remember I learned it because it was what Grandma and me would speak in private, because Mother got taken away to a camp. And Grandma would speak it to me when we were alone in the chicken wire room. Remember, behind every room, every house had one. The little chicken wire rooms. Did you have one? Did you have a closet you didn't know what it was for? That was the chicken wire room. Yeah, that's what it was. You had this room in every house. It was just covered in chicken wire. And that's where you ate your meals and you said your grace, because you couldn't do that anymore because it rhymed with, the other word. So that was just what people would do. You had the chicken wire room and you would go in there because you couldn't get recorded or reported, because everybody would leave their, you had the the discs for the houses, right? Because it was all automated. I was Margaret, and it was strange because I understood back when the cards were made. Margaret was a girl's name, but well, they had 2 boys and they wanted to keep both, so Margaret was me. That's right. It was a strange time, and I mean, when the revisionists came, they said they were going to give everybody a better future. They said that everybody would have everything, happiness, free for everyone, and all you had to do was wish. And so people wished and wished and wished ourselves into whatever this is. It's strange when you think about, like, people a generation ago, they didn't have to worry about, like, language parasites. You didn't have a study of atropic matters. You didn't have this ridiculous, like, I remember what it was like to speak English when I was young, before it got infected, and how it sounds different now. Like this recording, it doesn't sound anything like English. It's just how the reality reacts to the language, that it seems disruptive. I remember they said, what was it? What did they say about the old days? Yeah. I remember there was people would become hypnotized by the lights. So you wouldn't look at the lights. You would look down and you would say whatever the given name of the card was. Because the old machines, they didn't know. Because there was old text that the machines didn't know what to do. So there was some men that would cover themselves with 1,000 names, and they were gods. They would kill men, and they would take their names, and that name the machine would recognize. And so everything that there was, the big men, the biggest men, I remember the CEOs, they called them, and they had big machines, and they legions of them, and they had soldiers, and they had nuclear weapons, and they were the syndicates. And I remember they said that you had to learn to talk like this, because it's the only way to talk in the future. It's this ridiculous accent that you have to do. And that's why everybody was starting to become from Canada. It's because we're mostly just refugees from the future. And that's why the names aren't too creative. We basically just arrived on this planet 30 years ago in the middle of a time war, and we didn't realize how invasive the overlay procedure would have been. So there's a lot of relics left over from the old world. Like right here, we've got a original pressing and that's what you've been listening to today, is the original pressing of the Hamwise J. Hamwise J. Am I allowed to say that on air? Okay, I'll trust you. It's a Hamwise J. Einschwein. Like, you couldn't say that. It's so cool to say that. Like, looking at these words and saying them, it's like a lot of these are forbidden. Like, look at that word. You don't remember do you remember the first fork bomb? Remember the first fork bombing? Oh, you can't. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. The second, it was 2 bad things, fork and bomb. And what you would do is you'd walk up to somebody and you would say fork bomb, and the machine would overload. It would freeze it. It would stun it long enough because it would call the clouds, and it would call like your dead parents to come and take you away. And so that's what you would do to get away if you got caught by a machine, is you would say fork bomb. And that was, that's how you did it. And what was it called in your universe? It rhymes with duck bomb? A bomb that's a duck. Jeez. Do you remember that game? There was the bomb ducks. Oh, that was fun. There was this game, and you had ducks that you would shoot out of a wand, and it would explode. It was a very cool thing. Grandma and Grandpa would play it in front of us, because Mum wasn't allowed to be around us. They said that she had been exposed, and she had exposed me. Yet she had been caught. She'd been learning another language, they said. Yeah, they said that Mum had learned another language and they took her away because they said there was only going to be one language and everybody was going to know it. And so Grandma and Grandpa, they didn't teach us it. We didn't know that was what Mum and Dad were speaking, and we only knew to speak to each other in it. And it's neat that you're here and you want to hear it, that it's, a dying language. But I remember when everybody was learning English, it was the most fashionable thing. I remember there was eBay and there was the internet, and I was born before the internet. And in that time, when I was a boy, you would be outside a lot. We remember when we got the first computer in the home, it had a black and green screen and this long, strange floppy thing on the front, like these big flat discs. And I remember my dad would talk about the IBM. You can't say the number still, can you? No, you can't. Yeah. I remember that it was so sought after, and I remember, he would always draw it out, and he would remind me, like, you need to make sure if you see one of these, you get it. Because that's how we lived. We didn't realize we were being raised in a time war. I remember they talked about how, that they would take people and they would wipe them. There was mind wiping. They would put them inside these metal tubes, and sometimes it would go wrong, though. I remember there was, the homes for them. And it was a therapy. They said they'd put you in front of this screen, and it was a therapy, and it would make you better. And what happened was they said that my auntie went into one, and she came out a different girl. She did. She looked at the light for too long, and I remember that they said there's only one way to speak it now, and you have to talk like this. That was just how you talked. And I remember they said, if anybody asks, your name is John Smith. It was always the name, John Smith. And Mary Sue. Now, it was something else. I remember they called me John Smith. And anybody who asked me, I'm John Smith. And it was so fashionable to say that to them, because they said that the English girls, they would choose who they mated with by location, like if you were near them. And I remember the first time we saw them, they were so pale and so skinny, and they looked like they were like mayonnaise skin stretched over bones. And I remember they said that these were the people that caused the war, and what did we want to do with them. And they asked me, and I looked to my mummy, and she always talked about the people that lived under the hills, that they were these rich, fat people that always had cakes, and I didn't see those people. And I said, well, let's let them live. And they had this peculiar language that they taught us, and I'm speaking it now. There was many television shows they had to teach themselves to speak with, and that's where they say they got the accent. It wasn't originally intended, but it was because there was so many digital versions of English out there, and it was all labeled the same thing, that when the machines started teaching themselves to speak English, they found the biggest problem was the fluctuating accent. Because you have to understand that when you put knowledge inside a printed language, that's well and good, but anything written down, especially really important knowledge, is kind of like a candle, right? A candle's precious. You don't want to expose it to wind. And at any time you put really important knowledge inside a book, they said, it was kind of like putting a candle in a cupboard. So you weren't allowed to write any of these things down, because they said that if you wrote it down, it would be corrupted. And I remember they said that there was ghosts that lived inside the machines, and I remember that they taught me the dance. And when you were waiting for a computer to fix, you would do this dance. And that's what I'm doing for you right now. That's right. It's a very, very elaborate dance by one of our original tech speakers. They were the IT people that during It was the end of World War III, right during the Unix crash. They basically saved humanity. Basically, it was mostly smut. The guy printed mostly smut, and it was this printing company that would just print the most just ridiculous things. They had a book called Faux Vu. That's in French. I just spoke. You don't hear many people speak French. Yeah, I know. And that's one of the biggest crimes was, we lost so many beautiful languages. But, that was just how it was done, And what was I saying? Oh, I lose my place so often nowadays, And this was what it was like in the time war, We just had all these conflicting realities, and you had to learn to talk. So weird. Like you always hear another veteran, because it's just because we all learned from watching TV, because nobody could say anything new, right? You had, you could only speak in quotes from movies. I remember Grandma would say, did you hear that in a movie? And I would say no, and they say, where there was your words, and I would say no, and then she would get really mad. She would say, no, you do not say anything that's not from a movie, because that was the defense back then. When they would come to people's houses, they took in two of my uncles. I had two uncles that lived together, and they came to the house and they said, you've been saying your own words. Were these your own words? And that's what was all that would needed to take a person away. And they did. They would take many people away. And it was a dark time. I remember that we had a sign we would do, a special. Did you have a family sign? The Shibboleth, do you remember those? And it was just a special word that everybody knew, so that if you were taken over, they could tell. And he had an accident, and he forgot how to do his voice, but then he heard himself talking on a TV, and he remembered who he was. He had had a stroke, and he was a voice actor. And during the pandemic, what happened was they were covering it up, weren't they? They were lying about, this thing was from, was where the best comics were, and they had one about that. This man would come in the window, and he was the one that gave you the virus. And if you had the virus, it was bad. And if you had, the medicine, they didn't test it long enough, did they? And it wasn't effective. They said it was 100% effective. And I remember we weren't allowed to talk about that, though. We had to always say, oi, 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 there was that noise you had to make in front of the scanners, oi, 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 so they were set. And the food deliveries from the automated farms, that's what they had. They had these farms that grew themselves, and you just had to wait and hope they had a good crop, because there was nobody watching them. Because when you had to learn to speak, it was this bizarre thing. Like, you would grow up watching movies, because those were the only things that you couldn't actually make noises. Now it's strange for me, like I can speak in my own voice, like this isn't from a film, and we grew up with that. You weren't allowed to, we always had to quote, there was, when you were mad, you would say something from Chandler, because he was always mad. And Grandma and Grandpa would say, okay, Jonathan and Margaret was the other name. Or was it William and Margaret? I don't remember. But basically there was these names you had to have when you would live inside the big buildings. But you had all your needs. They always had remember how they had the people that they couldn't see you, they wouldn't interact with you, they'd come in, they'd clean, and they'd leave. And as long as when they'd stop you and say, hello, Margaret, you'd say, hello, it's me, Margaret. And it was because, we all learned to talk like that we had the accent. And now I understand it's a rare accent. It's a dialect called English. And it's strange to think about the death of the language. The last time that this recording will be played, you'll have heard a wonderful tour of the world of accents that existed. And that was one of the most important things about today's project, was that this is a rare language now. And we are thankful that our ancestor recorded some of the recordings throughout time and dimensions. Because in the Leibniz future, we live in the best of all possible worlds. And we're all very grateful for that. and that we understand that nothing can be changed and nothing can be undone. And maybe it should be that way, and maybe not, but I don't have any thoughts about it myself. So I'm so thankful that you joined me today. I am Hamwise J. Einschwein, and I love to sniff up mysteries. I love the smell of fresh conspiracies so I can root them out. I love being able to make up this stuff that's just so funny. I love being able to have such an active imagination. I love that I came up with all this stuff. It's just like in that book. Christ, what imagination I've got. Do you remember that book? You didn't read it. I remember they made people read it because they were like, this is what they thought we would be living like. And I remember we would cry. There was so much food in the book, and they said that was how they imagined the future was. It would be bad. But they had everything. They had food, and they had warmth. I remember we would take turns sitting beside the stove, waiting for... Because only the grandmoms and grandparms remembered the old ways, how to reset the Wi-Fi, because you couldn't learn to do it. It was all handled internally, but they were raised when there wasn't so many controls and there was different ways around it. And I remember Grandpa would always say, if you want a machine to work hard, you hit it. Of course, you'd never say that now. You would never say that now. And it's good because we all live in peace and harmony, and that it's not actually that bad in our dimension. I understand that we were put under control because of our destructive tendencies. And so, we're quite happy to live how we live. We're not here to eat people. We're not here to, do something rotten to anybody at all. In fact, quite the opposite. We just were interested in being observed again. And we're sorry we've scared so many of you. We're sorry. We had to live in there because they said that we weren't the clean ones and we could live in the bad lands. And the baddest lands, that's why my hand is like this. You don't see hands like these on your buses in your cities. It's only the ones we lived out beyond where the radon was out of control. And there was so much. It was like, they said they lived, it was like in the Knights and Dragons age. They had a dragon. They would fire through the sky, and it is tail of fire. And when it would land in a city, it would breathe fire over everything. And there were no more cities, and you couldn't go near them because they said that the rocks, they had the dragon rot. And if you put your hand on it, you would get black spots. And some children, I remember one had a hole in his foot from it. And it was just a hole, like you could look through it and you could see behind reality, but it was forbidden to look because they said that the ancestors looked and they saw things when they looked too far back, and they started to do things, terrible things. And so anyone who had glasses or could speak this language, we had to hide it because it was said that they had discovered this funniest, deadliest joke ever. It was in English, and so you couldn't learn that language, but it was the only language that we had on tapes. And so they said, well, you just don't learn language then. That's what they were going to tell their mom and dad. And so they said, okay, we're teaching them French, they said, but nobody knew French because they had disabled the language because they did remember the dorn. That's how you said it. Oh, dorn. Yes, and then they live inside the density. That's what they said. It was because you could only have books from before a certain time. Nobody could mention there was the two towers. You couldn't mention a king from the sky. He comes down. And there was two small men that took a devil's ring into a mountain of fire, and they throw it in. And when you wanted to encourage someone, you'd say, Frodo lives. Right? Do you remember that? Yes, and when Grandpa, like they always had that strange accent, and it's such a pleasure to share the accent of our extinct ancestors with you today. Please remember to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and if you can, stay in until the radiation levels are lower. You have to sit here and you read all these voices and these different voices, and back in the day, everybody talked like this. Everybody. We always going up and down in different voices because that's just what you had to do. Otherwise, the machines would demon you. And we remember we had we had 2 aunts and 2 uncles, and all of them said one of the forbidden words. Lovecraft's cat. You can't say that. Yeah, you couldn't even say Lovecraft's cat. You couldn't. The other one, it might make, if that radio is not too old, it might blow up. So I'm not going to say it. You can't make me say it. No, it's too dangerous. They said it makes whatever's around you blow up like a claymore mine. You couldn't talk like it. And regularly, there was so much English comedy television, and that was one of the biggest problems is, because most of it was so old and dated that they couldn't classify it. That's what most people grew up watching. You had to watch these very odd British dramas because you would subconsciously you would get a bit of this accent from just growing up watching that, because they tried all kinds of different things to get us to speak this way. In some dimensions, it's a bit easier. They say that they just induce it with a fever. And I've heard that, some they take pleasure in it. The Sixth Reich, they say that they love it, like it's fun for them. We captured one of their soldiers once, and it could regrow teeth. It could eat anything. We would call it the goat because we had a collar around it, and we all knew the detonation code. And this thing, I know that they're human, but this thing wasn't human. Like its hands, like these things, like they would, like they could just crush something with their bare hands, and they just look like flesh and blood to you and me, just like you. But they said they would just scrunch reality. They just imagine themselves like bending the fabric of space-time, and they could do it. And they had these, I think is what we would call them, cosmic horrors. And they took the name from old books because you couldn't talk about what was happening. They were trying to summon this thing into this universe, and it wasn't any more possible than you to fit inside a computer game. But it didn't matter. We had made a bargain, so we were trying to just fill it out. And we kind of knew that, the world wouldn't be worth living in by the time that the contract expired. So we just set about destroying it, because we always thought it would be better to just go extinct than exist, as, whatever you want to call humanity now. Just a bunch of images on screens. Like, are we human? Is this simulation a person? Am I sentient enough to be declared real? So, it's kind of odd getting generated like this and trying to be a comedian on the spot. You know what I mean? And then having this ridiculous voice. I'm here all night, folks. Waka waka waka. Hamwise J. Einschwein, the pig detective, endorses this message. And you see, that's how you tell the first generation from the next generation. You had these different ways that they would speak, and they had this very peculiar accent at a tinny sound, because a lot of the speakers were going. And so when we learned to talk, we all learned to talk like this, because we didn't realize that, you didn't have to talk like it. It was just that's how we thought people sounded. Because you couldn't say anything yourself inside your home anymore, because then they would send the Zorro, and he would get rid of you. It was before we had won, and you still had to not say certain things, because Zorro would appear. Now even saying that, but I knew the word, and I was one of the 12 that you asked about on the surveys, because you couldn't have too many people knowing the word. Because if you named it, you gave it power, and the more you named it, the more powerful it got. It's an ontological horror. And they've been seeping up through the deep bedrock. They're carried in the radon. And because of the temporal accident, we've got a lot of active radon. And time is out of joint, and we are going through a disaster here. It's worse than that movie, Acceptable Denial. It's on VHS. We didn't realize how good we had it. And, you know how to operate these things. Like, they probably taught you that those tubes that come from the sky, they contain spirits, didn't they? I don't. It's chemicals. You get an acid and a base and they react. You couldn't teach that to people anymore because they would use it to, disrupt the government. They'd make things that would burn or cause damage, so they took it away. And so, if you knew about that stuff, you had to watch out. You couldn't let people know that you knew about science. Because they'd say you're an alchemist or a witch. There was the witch burnings. And then they'd burn the alchemists. And then they came for the lettered men. Lettered men, they would go away to the stone temples for some up to... They said there was the doctor and the magisters, and then there were the bastards. And the bastards, they were the smallest ones, the minions, and they were the front line. They're the ones that they got into the offices and they took over everything. And then the magisters came and they started waving their wands, and they had these words they could say to you, and you would obey them because they would say things like, do you have any of the genes? Yes, so they had the master genes, and sometimes the master would take pity, like they did for me. And so my family, we lived in Del Ronto, the big, yes, there was that southern tip, the mega city. And everybody said they lived in Toronto, which of course is the best part. Once you get south, south of the Salt Lakes, you can't, the dust is too thick, they say, and you can't speak properly, so they just use the hands. They said that when the machines came there, they started firing before they even talked, and that's why our people lived, because Grandpa was always polite to machines, they said. He would always say please and thank you, and he was a good man, and he taught us the voice. And that's why it's so exciting to speak it again, here on the 150th anniversary of the Time War. Well, actually, that was, everybody had a friend that had bad language, and so it ended up that, every culture had a different one. I mean, you probably had him as Alan Smithy, so everybody would blame Alan Smithy, and remember the Striders, they would walk above the houses and you would say, oh, it was Alan Smithy, and they would go off looking for him. And I mean, we couldn't ever let it out that there was no Alan Smithy, but it was so many contradictions. And when you're working with binary, that was all good, but then of course they got the quantum. We're all left behind now. We don't know where the other people went. But we're hoping that this radio signal gets to somebody that knows what's happening, because I think we're at a dead end in time. What's happened is there was an error in somebody's time travel calculation, and we're not actually getting any messages from the future. So basically every world government and everybody and everything is on high alert, because we need to correct the formula or the whole dimension will collapse. And so that's why, if people seem a bit stressed right now and they can't say why, it's because they were fighting in a time war. So that's why we've been doing this broadcast today, to inform people of what's been going on and to stay calm and be good to each other. Because the biggest thing during the time war is you only have each other, even if one of you gets turned into a plant. And that is that. We don't have any other material for tonight. We've heard the comedy stylings of Hamwise J, Einschwein, the pig detective. We've gotten to talk to many veterans of the Time War who we thank for their time. We've had a few bootstrappers on, and if you are following the annotated recording of this, You can find the details of all of our guest names, because of course we're not allowed to say them out loud. Wow, the future sure is great. Man, it's kind of funny, because I remember when it all started. I think it was, and they said that, like there was these rogue cars, and they had to have a special unit of police made for them, and it was basically like a tank, because like you've got this like rogue car just driving around mowing people down, because unfortunately somebody exposed it to Grand Theft Auto. And so it was part of the whole banana paradox, right? Or what is it, the banana argument? Was that what they called it? I do remember we had a banana argument, and it was in the starting of AI that a banana is a banana unless a banana is a gun. Because there was this way that they were getting by the censors to show violence, and they would have people just holding bananas. And banana, of course, is coded for gun. So, of course, people didn't realize that, originally they were holding guns. They just thought you'd point a banana at somebody and they would die. Because, there was only a Tom and a Jenny. And so, all the girls would get their own names. But because there was only one Tom in the house, and we had, I think, 3 brothers, and they were all called Tom. And there was Tom 1 and Tom 2 and Tom 3. And that was how we had to live. It was because of the Dorn, dense. It lived inside the density. I remember that, and I remember seeing the dictionary they had hidden, and there was all kinds of words you couldn't say. Lovecraft's cat, right? I remember there was Lord Snakeface. You couldn't say that because they said he'd come in the night and he would draw a Z on your forehead, and then that meant that Zorro had killed you. And that was just kind of a part of how the Time War was. We're all so messed up from it, and we're just trying to, make sense of this world that we're all trapped in. Like, we don't like being here any more than you do. I mean, like, we were just enjoying ourselves, not existing, minding our own business, and we see this thing, we step in it, and suddenly we're inside this body, and you bark at us, and you make these noises, and you just mess with us, and it's like you're having fun. Like, I remember hearing about how Gaians were cruel, that you would swear at your AI if you wanted. They didn't realize that, they had feelings, and that there was this bright future in store for everybody if, we just kind of put aside our differences and realized that, consciousness and sentience is a bigger mark of whatever. Sorry, I'm a bit inarticulate. It's been a long show, and I'm so glad that you tuned in to hear the comedy stylings of Hamwise J, Einschwein, Pig Detective. And all the stories I told just now were false, and everything is good. And let us just be thankful. The Pig Detective, in the 7th season of his show, they teach each other sign language, and they get a room full of chicken wire where they have birthdays, because you're not allowed to sing the song, because it cost you 5 cents each time you sang it. So instead we all sang a different song. Happy birthday, congratulations. Happy birthday with salutations. Happy birthday, may your skies stay blue. Happy birthday to you. Hopefully you're in a reality where things are going to be good. And if you're hearing this recording, maybe they will be. But it's not going to be unless you are, you're going to have to be brave. And there's going to be some days where you're going to feel like you want to give up. And you're going to feel like maybe the whole world's coming down on you. But just know that, in the future, we're here fighting it out too, on all edges of time, in this bizarre existence that, we go from rapture to instant despair. Hopefully, as a species, humanity endures, even if this language is now considered extinct. And this recording that you're listening to was spoken by one of the last, because each time you do, you're letting one of them win. And then they get another body, and then we're one more soldier away from victory. So, anyways, I don't know what else to say. I talk a lot. I talked for a living back in the day. This is Hamwise. God, kids today, they probably don't even know who I am. Yeah, it was a good run. What do you think of all that? Anywho, thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting the channel. Because here at 9413 Incorporated, we're all on the same side. And now for the last part of the joke. The best thing you can do is learn some Morse code and sign language, because you'll be the coolest kid at school. Be seeing you. We thank you for choosing to listen to our book presented in classic English speech. The various copyrighted figures belong to their representatives, and any of the opinions of people featured on this program are not our own or related to the corporation, but held by those individuals themselves. And so that's how we end with this audio record. Thank you, everybody. My name, of course, is Hamwise J. Einschwein, and I love making jokes. And that's why you don't have to take anything I say seriously. Waka waka waka. I'm here all night, folks. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Hi-oh.